History is not a solved puzzle, but a conversation with the unknown. For centuries, experts have faced 50 ancient mysteries that refuse to surrender their secrets. By the end of this journey, you will see the past not as a settled record, but as a living frontier of discovery. How did a civilization build a structure so precise it aligns with the stars using only stone and rope? Why would a society create vast artworks only visible from the sky? These questions are just the beginning. What forgotten story from the ancient world makes you wonder what we have yet to learn? The very act of searching for these answers reveals something profound about our own place in time. It is a dialogue between our present curiosity and the silent witnesses of the past, a conversation where each new discovery can rewrite entire chapters of human history. Picture an archaeologist carefully brushing dust from a clay tablet, or an astronomer aligning a satellite image with the position of a 1,000-year-old temple. These are not separate fields but parts of a single grand investigation. The work requires a unique blend of patience and imagination, where experts must listen to what the evidence whispers, often filling in gaps with informed hypotheses that are constantly tested and retested. A single piece of pottery, inscribed with a previously unknown symbol, can force historians to reconsider trade routes across continents. A subtle shift in soil composition might reveal the outline of a city no written record ever mentioned. This is why these 50 mysteries hold such power. They are not merely unsolved puzzles, they are active frontiers. Each one represents a limit to our current understanding, a challenge that pushes science, technology, and historical thinking to evolve. The quest to solve them has led to the invention of new dating techniques, the use of ground-penetrating radar to see beneath the earth, and collaborations between linguists and computer scientists to decipher lost languages. It is a process that humbles us, reminding us how much we do not know, while simultaneously showcasing the incredible ingenuity we apply to the question. This vibrant, ongoing pursuit of the ancient world's secrets naturally leads us to our first profound category of enigmas, those that defy the very logic of their construction. These enduring questions often cluster into distinct categories, each representing a different kind of challenge to our understanding. Some mysteries are built from stone, immense architectural feats whose construction methods remain hotly debated. Others are etched in clay or painted on walls, artistic and written codes that have stubbornly resisted every attempt at decipherment. We find patterns in the stars, alignments carved into the landscape that suggest a sophisticated grasp of celestial cycles. And sometimes we uncover singular objects that feel out of place, artifacts that seem to belong to a different time entirely. Grouping the enigmas this way reveals a fascinating pattern in the unknown. It suggests that the gaps in our knowledge are not random, but point to specific areas where our ancestors' capabilities, beliefs, or experiences might have been far more nuanced than traditional histories have captured. This framework sets the stage perfectly for the first and perhaps most visually stunning category, the architectural wonders that stand as silent, monumental questions. The Great Pyramid of Giza does not simply stand on the desert plateau, it interrogates it. For over 4,500 years, its shadow has been a silent question mark against the sky, a monument so audacious in its perfection that it seems to challenge our modern assumptions about what ancient people could achieve. Its base is aligned to true north with a margin of error so tiny it feels intentional, a feat requiring astronomical observation of staggering accuracy. The structure itself is composed of approximately 2,300,000 individual blocks of limestone and granite, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, with some interior chambers built from single stones exceeding 50 tons. The logistical reality of this is almost incomprehensible. Even with today's cranes, trucks, and global supply chains, assembling such a project would be a monumental undertaking demanding years of precise planning and coordination. For the Old Kingdom Egyptians, armed with copper tools, ropes, and wooden sledges, it represents a puzzle that has consumed generations of archaeologists and engineers. How did they quarry, transport, and lift these colossal weights? The absence of any definitive contemporary blueprint has given rise to a spectrum of theories, each attempting to solve a different piece of the puzzle. Some researchers propose elaborate ramp systems, either spiraling around the growing structure or built straight up its sides, though the volume of material needed for such ramps creates its own engineering dilemma. Others suggest a more ingenious use of the landscape itself, theorizing that the builders harnessed the annual flood of the Nile to float blocks right to the construction site on canals. There is even a hypothesis involving an internal ramp, a corkscrew tunnel within the pyramid's body that workers used to haul stones upward as they built. Yet no single theory has managed to silence the debate. The mystery extends beyond mere mechanics into the realm of knowledge. The pyramid's dimensions are not arbitrary. They encode mathematical ratios like pi and the golden ratio with a precision that suggests a deep, perhaps sacred, understanding of geometry and the cosmos. This combination of brute physical scale and refined intellectual achievement is what makes the pyramid a foundational enigma. It sets a precedent, a high bar of mystery that forces us to ask not just how they built it, but what kind of society could organize such an endeavor, motivating and sustaining a workforce for decades to achieve a vision that would only be complete long after many of them were gone. It is a testament to human ambition that continues to baffle, a first and formidable entry on our list that reminds us some answers are still buried beneath the sand. While the pyramids challenge our understanding of ancient scale, a far smaller object found beneath the waves poses an equally profound puzzle about their knowledge. In the early 1900s, sponge divers working off the coast of a Greek island named Antikythera stumbled upon the wreck of a Roman cargo ship. Among the statues and pottery recovered from the silent, sunken hold was a corroded lump of bronze and wood, so encrusted and misshapen it was initially set aside with little notice. Decades later, careful cleaning and modern X-ray analysis revealed it to be something extraordinary, a complex clockwork device consisting of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut and mounted within a wooden frame. Dated to around the 2nd century before the Common Era, this Antikythera mechanism has been called the world's first known analog computer. Its purpose was not to perform calculations in the modern digital sense, but to model the cosmos. By turning a hand crank on its side, an operator could advance a series of dials and pointers to predict the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and likely the 5 known planets, forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and even track the timing of ancient athletic games like the Olympics. The accuracy of its predictions, based on advanced Babylonian astronomical cycles and Greek geometrical theories, is staggering. This was not a toy or a speculative model. It was a precise instrument of science, a portable planetarium that demonstrated a mechanical understanding of the heavens unmatched for over 1,000 years. And this is where the true mystery takes hold. The craftsmanship implies it was not a one-off miracle, but the product of a sophisticated tradition of gear making and precise metal casting. We have writings from brilliant thinkers of that era, yet none describe such a device in detail. The knowledge required to design and build it seems to have vanished almost completely after this period. For well over a millennium, no civilization in the Western world produced anything of comparable mechanical complexity. Who were the geniuses who built it? Was it the work of a single brilliant workshop or part of a wider, now lost school of engineering? More hauntingly, why was this peak of technological innovation not recorded, shared, and built upon? Its solitary survival in a shipwreck suggests a terrifying possibility that other marvels of ancient science may have been lost to time, their secrets sinking to the bottom of the sea or crumbling into dust, leaving behind only this one cryptic clue to a forgotten chapter of human ingenuity. The silence of the Peruvian desert holds a question written on a scale so vast it can only be read from the heavens. Stretching across nearly 250 square miles of the Nazca Plateau are hundreds of immense geoglyphs, lines and figures carved into the earth itself. By carefully removing the dark, sun-baked surface stones to expose the lighter-colored soil beneath, ancient artists created a gallery of staggering proportions. There are clean, razor-straight lines that run for miles, perfect geometric shapes like trapezoids and triangles, and elaborate depictions of a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, and even a figure often called the astronaut, a humanoid form with wide, staring eyes. The precision of these designs is remarkable, their curves and angles maintained over enormous distances. Yet their most defining characteristic is also the source of their deepest mystery. These artworks are only fully comprehensible from a vantage point high in the air, a perspective the Nazca people, who created them between 500 before the Common Era and 500 after, are not believed to have possessed. This single, undeniable fact has ignited a century of debate. Why would a culture invest such immense, coordinated effort into creating art it could never see? The most grounded theories point to celestial and spiritual purposes. Some researchers suggest the lines functioned as a giant astronomical calendar, their alignments marking solstices, equinoxes, or the risings of important stars, turning the entire plateau into an observatory for tracking time and seasons. Others propose they were sacred pathways, walked during rituals to communicate with deities believed to reside in the mountains or the sky, with the act of walking the lines being more important than viewing them. Perhaps the figures were offerings to gods who could see them from above, ensuring water and fertility for a people living in one of the driest places on Earth. However, the sheer visual impact of seeing a perfect condor with a 400-foot wingspan from the air pushes speculation into more controversial territory. This has led to enduring but fringe theories about ancient hot air balloon technology or even guidance for extraterrestrial visitors, ideas often fueled by the line's otherworldly appearance from above. While most scholars dismiss these as modern projections, the core puzzle remains powerfully intact. The Nazca Lines force us to confront a different way of perceiving the world, one where monumental art was not created for human spectatorship in the traditional sense, but as an integral part of a cosmological dialogue between the earth and the sky. They are a testament to a community's shared vision and organizational skill, a collective act of faith etched permanently into the landscape, asking us to consider whether the true purpose of a message is in its sending or in its receiving. Plato's story begins not with a map but with a warning. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 years before the Common Era, the philosopher recounts a tale told to his ancestor Solon by Egyptian priests. They spoke of a mighty island empire named Atlantis, lying beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we know as the Strait of Gibraltar. This civilization was described as technologically advanced, morally proud, and militarily powerful, a naval force that conquered parts of Europe and Africa. Its capital was a marvel of concentric rings of water and land, bridged by canals and adorned with temples of silver and gold. But according to the story, the people of Atlantis grew arrogant and corrupt. In a single terrible day and night of earthquakes and floods, the entire island was swallowed by the sea, vanishing forever. For Plato, this was likely a compelling allegory about the dangers of hubris and the ideal state, a philosophical tool. Yet the vividness of the description, the specific details of its geography and downfall, have proven impossible for generations to dismiss as mere fiction. This is the heart of the mystery. Is Atlantis a lost chapter of human history, or one of the world's most enduring metaphors? The search for an answer has launched 1,000 expeditions and fueled endless debate, splitting neatly into 3 compelling schools of thought. The first holds that Atlantis was purely a literary invention, a plot device crafted by Plato to illustrate his ideas about politics, virtue, and divine punishment. In this view, the detailed description is part of the story's power, making the moral lesson feel tangible and urgent. The second, and perhaps most popular theory among researchers, suggests Plato was weaving a real historical disaster into his narrative. The leading candidate is the catastrophic volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around the year 1600 before the Common Era. This event was one of the largest volcanic explosions in human history, devastating the sophisticated Minoan civilization on Crete with tsunamis and ash falls. The parallels are striking, an advanced island culture brought low by a sudden geological cataclysm. Perhaps, over centuries, echoes of this real event traveled and transformed into the legend Plato recorded. The third school is the most adventurous, proposing that Atlantis was a distinct, now submerged civilization whose physical remains await discovery. This has led proponents to scour the globe, from the azure waters of the Bahamas to the mud flats of southern Spain, from the Azores in the mid-Atlantic to even Antarctica, each location supported by interpretations of geological features or ambiguous sonar readings. Despite these fervent searches, no archaeological site has ever yielded unambiguous proof, like an inscription bearing the name Atlantis or artifacts in a style wholly foreign to known cultures. The enduring power of the Atlantis myth, then, may lie less in its physical location and more in what it represents. It taps into a deep human fascination with catastrophic loss and the haunting idea of a golden age that slipped beneath the waves. It asks a tantalizing question: could there have been a sophisticated prehistoric culture, a progenitor of knowledge, whose achievements were completely erased by time and tide? This possibility challenges the linear narrative of human progress, suggesting we might be rediscovering, not discovering, certain truths. The search itself becomes a mirror, reflecting our own desires to find meaning in the deep past, to uncover a forgotten origin story that explains who we are. Whether allegory, amplified memory, or undiscovered ruin, Atlantis remains the ultimate ghost in the machine of history, a blank space on the map that we cannot stop trying to fill. A different kind of silence fills the pages of a book no one can read. Housed within a vault at Yale University is a small, unassuming volume that represents perhaps the most stubborn linguistic puzzle ever created, the Voynich Manuscript. Dating to the early 15th century, this 240-page codex is a world unto itself, written from cover to cover in a flowing, elegant script that corresponds to no known alphabet. Its pages are crowded with detailed, colorful illustrations that are both familiar and deeply strange, depicting plants that do not grow on Earth, intricate astrological diagrams featuring unknown constellations, and small, nude female figures bathing in what appears to be a system of green, interconnected pipes. For over a century since its rediscovery by a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich in 1912, it has defied every attempt at understanding. The fundamental question is deceptively simple: what is it? The text displays statistical patterns consistent with a real, structured language, with word lengths and character repetitions that mimic natural communication. This suggests it is not random gibberish. Yet, despite the concerted efforts of the world's top military cryptographers who cracked enemy codes during the World Wars, renowned linguists, and even sophisticated artificial intelligence algorithms, the words remain utterly opaque. The drawings offer no clear key, presenting botanical specimens that are fantastical composites of real plants, celestial charts that don't match known medieval astronomy, and biological diagrams that seem to blend human anatomy with botanical systems. This has led to a fascinating spectrum of theories about its origin and purpose. Some scholars have argued it is an elaborate, centuries-old hoax, crafted to deceive a wealthy patron, perhaps using a complex but meaningless cipher to give the illusion of profound content. Others propose it is written in a genuine but extinct natural language, one that has left no other trace in the historical record, its meaning lost when its last speaker passed away. A more popular theory views it as a coded treatise on herbal medicine or early natural philosophy, with the strange plants representing symbolic concepts or encrypted recipes for remedies, their true identities hidden to protect valuable knowledge. There is even a compelling suggestion that the manuscript is an example of glossolalia, or automatic writing, a stream of subconscious symbols given form. What makes the Voynich Manuscript uniquely haunting is its completeness. It is not a fragment or a damaged scroll. It is an entire, beautifully crafted book, dense with information that feels deliberately composed. Holding it is like holding a locked diary from another universe, every page screaming with intention that we cannot hear. It stands as a direct, silent challenge to our modern arrogance, a reminder that the past can encrypt its thoughts in ways that our most powerful tools cannot yet unravel. In a world where we can decode genomes and transmit data across the solar system, this quiet book from 600 years ago patiently waits, guarding its secret, proving that some dialogues with history are still a monologue. Stonehenge rises from the Salisbury Plain not as a ruin but as a question in stone. Its iconic circle of Sarsen trilithons, those massive uprights capped by lintels, is merely the final stage of a story that unfolded over 1,500 years, beginning around 3,100 years before the Common Era. We can trace the broad strokes of its construction, the digging of the circular ditch and bank, the arrival of the smaller bluestones, and later the erection of the gigantic sarsens. Yet, for all this archaeological understanding, the people behind the monument remain ghostly figures. They left no written records, only their tools, their pottery, and this breathtaking testament to their collective will. The mystery is not that it was built, but who built it, and what profound idea was compelling enough to drive such an endeavor across 80 generations. The first logistical puzzle begins in the Preseli Hills of Western Wales, over 150 miles away. How did Neolithic people, without the wheel or draft animals, transport dozens of bluestones, each weighing up to 4 tons, across rugged terrain and mighty rivers? The journey itself is a monumental feat of prehistoric engineering and social coordination. One leading theory suggests they used a combination of wooden sledges, rollers, and sheer human muscle power, perhaps moving the stones during winter when the ground was frozen and slippery. Another, more controversial hypothesis proposes a water route, with the stones floated on rafts along the Welsh coast and up rivers, a perilous journey requiring remarkable knowledge of tides and currents. The very act of choosing these specific stones from a distant, sacred landscape hints at a purpose far deeper than convenience. It suggests the stones themselves held intrinsic power, perhaps believed to be the dwelling places of ancestors or deities, making their arduous pilgrimage an essential part of the ritual. Once assembled, the architecture speaks a silent language of celestial alignment. The axis of the monument is carefully oriented to frame the sunrise at the summer solstice and the sunset at the winter solstice. This was no accident. It demonstrates a sophisticated, long-term observation of the sky, an understanding that the sun's journey across the horizon marked the turning points of the year, governing seasons, agriculture, and the rhythm of life. Some researchers believe the site also served as a giant observatory for predicting lunar eclipses, events that would have held immense spiritual significance. This transforms Stonehenge from a simple temple into a cosmic clock, a place where the community could physically witness and celebrate the eternal cycles of the universe, reaffirming their place within a sacred order. But what were they celebrating or commemorating here? While often called a temple, that word feels too small. It was likely a multifunctional ceremonial complex, a place for seasonal gatherings, rituals of renewal, and perhaps honoring the departed. The surrounding landscape is dotted with burial mounds, suggesting a deep connection to ancestry. The effort required, spanning centuries, points to a society with a stable, shared belief system and a highly organized social structure capable of planning beyond any single lifetime. They were investing in a legacy of stone for a purpose we can only feel in the silent presence of the stones themselves. The true meaning of Stonehenge is locked within the lost rituals, songs, and stories of its builders. It stands as a powerful reminder that the greatest monuments are not just feats of engineering, but physical manifestations of a culture's deepest questions about time, the cosmos, and what lies beyond. The wilderness has a way of swallowing stories whole. On the coast of what is now North Carolina, a small English colony planted its hopes in the unfamiliar soil of the New World. In 1587, a supply ship finally returned after a long delay, sent to resupply the struggling settlement on Roanoke Island. What the crew found was not a community, but a haunting vacancy. Over 100 men, women, and children had vanished without a trace. The fort and cabins stood empty, dismantled in an orderly fashion, with no signs of struggle or battle. The only clue was a single word carved into a wooden post, Croatoan, and the letters CRO carved into a nearby tree. These cryptic markings ignited a mystery that has simmered for over 4 centuries. Where did the lost colony go? The word itself points toward a plausible answer. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, now known as Hatteras Island, and also the name of a Native American community who lived there and had maintained generally peaceful contact with the English. Governor John White, the colony's leader who arrived on that supply ship, had agreed with the settlers that if they were forced to leave, they would carve a Maltese cross into a tree to signal distress. No cross was found. The simple carving of the name suggested a deliberate move, perhaps to join or seek refuge with the Croatoan people. This theory of integration is supported by later accounts from English explorers in the following decades. Some reported encountering indigenous communities along the coast who spoke English, wore European-style clothing, and even described ancestors who could talk in a book, suggesting literacy. Other stories told of gray-eyed individuals among the tribes, potential descendants of intermarriage. These tantalizing oral histories and second-hand reports paint a picture not of a tragic end, but of a difficult transition, a community assimilating into a new world to survive. Yet the complete absence of definitive physical proof, a single English artifact conclusively linked to the settlers in a Croatoan context, or a European-style grave, leaves the door open to other, darker possibilities. The late 16th century was a time of immense hardship and fragile alliances. The colony was poorly supplied from the start, reliant on uncertain shipments from England across a vast ocean. Conflict with some neighboring groups had already occurred. It is possible that after Governor White's departure to seek help, the settlers faced a desperate choice. They might have attempted to sail back to England in small boats and been lost at sea, or fallen victim to illness, hunger, or a confrontation that left no survivors to tell the tale. The word carved on the post could have been a hastily written destination they never reached. Modern archaeology continues to sift the soil for answers. Excavations on Hatteras Island have uncovered a mix of Elizabethan and Native American artifacts from the correct time period, including a gold ring and pieces of a writing slate, hints that fuel the integration theory. Meanwhile, other researchers look inland, following a map with a hidden patch that may point to a site where a splinter group could have sought shelter. Each fragment of evidence adds nuance but no closure. the disappearance of the Roanoke colony endures because it is more than a historical whodunit. It represents the razor-thin margin between survival and oblivion on the edge of a vast, unknown continent. It is a story of ordinary people caught in an extraordinary gamble, their individual fates dissolving into the landscape, leaving behind only a word as a fragile bridge between a world that was and a world that might have been. Gold is not the only thing that gives an object its power. For the ancient Israelites, the most sacred object was not a statue or an idol, but a chest. The Ark of the Covenant, described in the Hebrew Bible as a gold-covered wooden box topped by 2 cherubim, was far more than a reliquary. It was believed to be the literal throne of the divine presence on earth, a focal point of worship so potent that touching it improperly could result in a fatal shock. Within it, tradition held, rested the stone tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments, the foundational covenant between a people and their deity. Its last definitive historical location was within Solomon's first temple in Jerusalem. Then, in the year 586 before the Common Era, the Babylonian army breached the city walls, looted the temple's treasures, and reduced the holy structure to rubble. The biblical account lists many items taken as plunder, but the Ark is conspicuously absent from that inventory. From that moment of destruction, it simply vanishes from the historical record, leaving behind a silence that has echoed for 2.5 millennia. Where did it go? This question sits at a unique crossroads where faith, history, and adventure collide. One enduring theory suggests it was never taken. Foreseeing the Babylonian siege, pious priests could have secreted the Ark away into a hidden chamber deep beneath the Temple Mount, a labyrinth of tunnels and cisterns known only to a select few. This idea fuels modern explorations, though archaeological work on the site is profoundly sensitive, governed by religious and political complexities far beyond mere scholarship. A second and deeply held tradition places the Ark thousands of miles to the south. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims the sacred object resides in the town of Axum, within the chapel of the tablet, guarded by a single monk who is its lifelong guardian. Their narrative, detailed in the Kebra Nagast or Glory of the Kings, tells of Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, who brought the Ark to Ethiopia for safekeeping. While the sanctity of this claim is unwavering for millions of believers, it remains a matter of faith rather than verifiable history, as the guardian monk never permits scientific examination. A third, simpler possibility is that it was destroyed. The Babylonians were thorough in their conquests. The Ark could have been melted down for its gold or shattered in the chaotic violence of the temple's destruction. Yet, the absence of its mention as plunder makes this feel, to many, like an unsatisfying end for such a pivotal artifact. The search for the Ark, therefore, transcends archaeology. It becomes a quest for tangible connection to a foundational story, a desire to hold proof of a narrative that shaped civilizations. It has inspired everything from medieval knightly quests to Hollywood blockbusters, each iteration reflecting the yearnings of its own time. Whether hidden, transported, or lost, the Ark's enduring mystery lies in its symbolic weight. It represents the human desire to find a physical anchor for the intangible forces of faith, history, and identity. A single object that could, if found, speak across the ages with a voice of undeniable authority. Isolation can be a powerful sculptor of culture. Far out in the vast expanse of the Pacific, over 2,000 miles from the nearest inhabited shore, lies a small, triangular island known to the world as Easter Island or Rapa Nui. Its most famous inhabitants are not the Polynesian people who settled there, but the silent, watchful giants they left behind. Nearly 900 massive stone figures, the moai, stand with their backs to the sea, their heavy brows and elongated features gazing eternally inland across the grassy slopes. These are not mere statues, they are ancestral embodiments carved from volcanic tuff at a single quarry and then transported, some weighing over 80 tons, to ceremonial platforms called who all around the coastline. The central mystery is not their artistic style, but the staggering logistical feat their creation represents on such a remote and resource-limited island. How did a society using stone tools and human strength alone achieve this? The most widely supported theory involves a process of walking the moe. Researchers and experimental archaeologists have demonstrated that by carefully rocking a moe from side to side with ropes, teams could pivot it forward in a controlled, upright shuffle, effectively making the statue walk itself across the landscape. This method, supported by oral traditions, would have required coordinated labor, sturdy ropes made from island vegetation, and a carefully prepared path. Yet, this answer only deepens the next, more profound question: why did they do it? The drive to carve and erect nearly 1,000 of these colossal figures speaks to a society where honoring ancestors was the central pillar of cultural life. Each moe represented a powerful lineage chief or important figure, their presence believed to channel protective mana or spiritual power over the community. This was a sustainable spiritual economy for centuries. However, the very act of creation may have sown the seeds of challenge. The theory of societal collapse, popularized for decades, suggests that the intensive logging for rollers and ropes, combined with land clearing for agriculture, led to severe deforestation, soil erosion, and the loss of the raw materials needed for fishing canoes. This environmental strain, the story goes, triggered conflict, food shortages, and a fall from a complex society. Recent archaeological work, however, paints a more nuanced and resilient picture. Evidence suggests the Rapa Nui people were ingenious adapters, building circular stone gardens to protect crops from the wind, and likely managing their resources more carefully than previously thought. The toppling of the moe, once seen as a symbol of violent civil war, might have been a deliberate, ritual act of changing religious practices, not simply destruction in anger. The true lesson of the moe may not be a straightforward tale of ecological suicide, but a complex narrative about cultural evolution under extreme pressure. It is a story of a people who expressed their identity and connection to the past through monumental art, who adapted brilliantly to their isolation, and who faced tremendous hardships that transformed, but did not completely erase, their society. The statues stand today not just as relics of a mystery, but as powerful reminders of human creativity, resilience, and the delicate balance between a culture's ambitions and the island that sustains it. Sometimes a name is all that remains of a civilization. Carved into the walls of mortuary temples at Medinet Habu in Egypt, a pharaoh's victory boasts of repelling a terrifying and enigmatic foe. The inscriptions and reliefs from the reign of Ramesses III, around 1177 before the Common Era, depict a chaotic scene of naval battles and desperate defenses against a coalition he simply calls the Sea Peoples. These were not a single nation, but a confederation of groups with names like the Peliset, the Shekelesh, and the Denyen, arriving in ships and ox carts with their families, suggesting a mass migration, not just a raiding party. Their assaults were part of a wider cataclysm known as the Late Bronze Age collapse, a period where the great empires and trading networks of the Eastern Mediterranean, from the Hittites in Anatolia to the Mycenaeans in Greece, fell into ruin within a span of roughly 50 years. Cities were burned, trade routes severed, and entire writing systems forgotten, plunging the region into a centuries-long period often called a Dark Age. The Sea Peoples were both a symptom and an accelerant of this collapse, yet they remain history's ultimate ghosts, attackers without a homeland, conquerors who left no chronicles of their own. Who were they, and what immense force set them in motion? The theories are as turbulent as the seas they crossed. Some scholars trace their origins to the fractured world of the Aegean. identifying the Peliset with the later Philistines of the Bible, who may have been displaced Mycenaean Greeks after the fall of their palace centers. Others look to the coast of Anatolia, modern Turkey, or even to the Italian peninsula, suggesting the Shekelesh could be early Sicilians. The most compelling explanations view them not as a unified invading army, but as a domino effect of desperate humanity. A perfect storm of factors likely triggered their movement, a prolonged regional drought that caused crop failures and famine, possibly coupled with seismic activity that disrupted communities. These environmental pressures would have created populations on the move, displaced peoples who turned to piracy and mercenary service, coalescing into roving bands that attacked the weakened, grain-rich states of the eastern Mediterranean. They were both the spark and the kindling, accelerating the downfall of societies already straining under internal strife and economic disruption. The true mystery of the Sea Peoples lies in their silence. They toppled kingdoms, fought pharaohs, and reshaped the map of the ancient world, yet they never carved their own version of events into stone. We see them only through the eyes of those who survived them, labeled as brutal invaders from the sea. This absence forces us to confront a haunting aspect of history, that sometimes the most pivotal actors are those whose stories are never written, whose identities dissolve into the waves, leaving behind only their profound and irreversible impact on the world they helped to end. The walls of Sacsayhuaman do not simply enclose a space, they defy the logic of stone itself. Perched on a hill overlooking the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, this monumental complex presents a puzzle of breathtaking precision. Its most famous feature is a series of 3 zigzagging defensive walls, built from colossal blocks of limestone, some weighing over 120 tons. The sheer mass is staggering, but it is the joinery that leaves modern engineers speechless. Each irregular polygonal block is cut and shaped to fit perfectly with its neighbors in a complex 3-dimensional jigsaw, locked together so tightly that, as the saying goes, not even a piece of paper can slide between them. This was accomplished without a single drop of mortar and without the use of iron tools or the wheel. The Inca had bronze, which is softer than the stone they were shaping, and stone hammers. How did they achieve such impossible accuracy? The conventional explanation involves meticulous craftsmanship. Stonemasons likely used a technique of trial and error, repeatedly placing a block, marking the high points, and patiently pecking away at the contact surfaces with harder stone tools until a perfect fit was achieved. This process, requiring immense patience and a sophisticated spatial understanding, could account for the seamless joins, yet the scale and speed of construction and the handling of such enormous weights across mountainous terrain push the boundaries of this explanation. This gap has given rise to more speculative theories. One persistent idea involves the use of a plant-based liquid that could temporarily soften the stone, allowing it to be molded like clay. Another, even more fascinating hypothesis points to the use of sound or vibration. Could specific resonant frequencies, perhaps from large drums or chanting, have been used to make the stone more malleable or to aid in its precise shaping? While these ideas capture the imagination, they lack solid archaeological evidence. The true genius of Sacsayhuaman may lie in a profound, culturally embedded knowledge system. The Inca saw stone as a living entity, a huaca or sacred force. The act of construction was not a battle against the material, but a dialogue with it. The seamless fit was not just an engineering goal, but a spiritual imperative, creating a unity that made the structure eternally strong and sacred. This mastery allowed the walls to withstand centuries of earthquakes that would topple modern buildings, as the interlocking stones simply shift and settle before locking back into place. The fortress stands as a silent lesson in a different kind of engineering, one where patience, reverence for material, and a collective will could achieve what our own technology still struggles to replicate. A different kind of power might have hummed within a simple clay pot. In the basement of the National Museum of Iraq sits an unassuming artifact, a 6-inch tall terracotta jar dated to the Parthian period, around 2,000 years ago. Inside this jar, archaeologists found something peculiar, a copper cylinder sealed at the bottom with asphalt surrounding an iron rod. When the curator of the museum, Wilhelm Koenig, examined it in the 1930s, he proposed a startling idea. This object looked remarkably like a primitive electric battery. The principle is basic electrochemistry. If the jar were filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or wine, the electrolyte would allow electrons to flow between the dissimilar metals, generating a small but measurable electric current. Modern replicas have proven it works, producing just over 1 volt of electricity, roughly the same as a modern AA battery. The immediate, thrilling question is obvious. What on earth would an ancient Mesopotamian artisan do with a volt of electricity? The most popular theory is electroplating, the process of using an electric current to coat a base metal with a thin layer of a more precious one, like gold or silver. This practice was known in the region, and a weak current from such a cell could feasibly achieve it over time. The idea suggests a forgotten thread of applied science, a practical workshop technology for gilding small objects like religious statues or jewelry. Yet, for all its elegant logic, this theory faces a significant evidential gap. No wires, no connectors, and crucially, no definitively electroplated artifacts from that era have ever been found alongside these jars to confirm their use. This absence leads many mainstream archaeologists to a more mundane explanation, that the jars were simply secure storage vessels for important papyrus or parchment scrolls, with the iron rod acting as a core to roll the scroll around and the asphalt providing a protective seal against moisture. The scrolls long since rotted away, leaving behind only the mysterious metal components. This debate is the core of the mystery. Is the Baghdad Battery a profound anomaly or an intriguing coincidence? It forces us to consider the nature of discovery itself. Knowledge is not always a linear march from ignorance to enlightenment. It can be sporadic, localized, and practical. A workshop might have stumbled upon a tingling sensation when 2 metals touched in a vinegar bath, recognized it could transfer a golden sheen to another object, and used the effect for generations without ever developing a formal theory of electricity. That practical secret could then have died with that specific guild of artisans, leaving behind only these cryptic jars as silent witnesses to a forgotten trick of the trade. Whether battery or scroll case, the artifact serves as a powerful reminder that our timelines of invention are often just the stories of the knowledge that survived. It whispers of parallel paths of understanding, of small sparks of insight that flickered in the darkness long before they were kindled into the steady light of modern science. Across the channel, another silent army stands in perfect, bewildering formation. The Carnac Stones of Brittany are not a single monument, but a sprawling, open-air cathedral of granite. Over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones, or menhirs, stretch across the French countryside in dense, parallel rows that run for miles. Unlike the arranged circles of Stonehenge, the stones at Carnac march in eerie, regimented lines, like a ghostly military parade frozen in time for over 6,000 years. The sheer number is staggering, but the true mystery lies in their deliberate, almost mathematical arrangement. These are not randomly placed boulders. They form distinct alignments, with the largest stones, some towering over 20 feet tall, often positioned at the western end of the rows, gradually diminishing in size as the lines progress eastward. This careful gradation speaks of intention, a grand design executed across generations. What powerful idea could compel a Neolithic society to undertake such a sustained, colossal effort? The most compelling theories listen to the whispers of the sky. Many researchers believe the alignments functioned as a sophisticated lunar observatory. primary rows are oriented to frame the extreme rising and setting points of the moon on the horizon, events that occur on an 18.6-year cycle. Tracking this complex cycle would have required meticulous, long-term observation, suggesting a deep preoccupation with time, tides, and celestial rhythms far more intricate than a simple solar calendar. This connection to the moon points toward a possible spiritual focus, perhaps a form of moon worship or a belief system where lunar phases governed rituals of fertility, hunting, or commemoration. Other interpretations look earthward, seeing the alignments as sacred pathways for ceremonial processions, where communities would walk between the stones during seasonal festivals, physically moving through a landscape charged with spiritual meaning. The stones themselves, often sourced from ridges visible on the horizon, might have been seen as embodiments of ancestral spirits or territorial markers, turning the entire area into a vast memorial to the community's lineage and its connection to the land. This idea of a sustained tradition is key. The site was not built in a single lifetime. Archaeological evidence suggests the alignments were erected and rearranged over a period of 2,000 years, from around 4,500 to 2,500 years before the Common Era. This represents an unbroken chain of cultural memory, a tradition passed down through 80 generations, each adding to or modifying the work of their forebears according to a shared, evolving vision. They left us no written manual, no carvings to decipher, only this cryptic text written in granite on the hills of Brittany. To walk among the Carnac Stones today is to walk through a library where the books are all made of stone, and the language is one of alignment, sequence, and silent endurance. It invites us to read the landscape itself, to understand that for these ancient people, the boundary between the physical world and the spiritual realm, between measuring the moon and honoring the ancestors, was a line drawn not in sand but in enduring stone. The greatest conqueror in history chose to vanish without a trace. Genghis Khan, the visionary leader who forged the vast Mongol Empire, united the steppe tribes and set in motion a legacy that would reshape continents. Yet for all his world-altering impact, his final wish was for absolute obscurity. According to long-standing tradition, when he passed away in 1227, his loyal followers carried out his last command with ruthless efficiency. They transported his body back to his homeland, buried him in an unmarked grave, and then, as the most famous version of the legend tells it, diverted a river directly over the burial site to erase it forever. To ensure no one could reveal the location, the funeral escort was then reportedly executed by a second, loyal unit of soldiers who themselves were sworn to secrecy. This created a chain of silence that has remained unbroken for nearly 8 centuries. The lost tomb of Genghis Khan is not merely a missing archaeological site. It is the deliberate and successful erasure of a world leader's physical resting place, a final act of power that continues to defy the modern world's most advanced tools. The search is fraught with unique challenges that go far beyond simple geography. In Mongolia, there is a deep cultural reverence and a strong traditional taboo against disturbing the earth where ancestors are laid to rest. This makes any physical excavation not just an archaeological endeavor, but a sensitive cultural matter. Furthermore, the historical sources are deliberately vague, likely by design. They speak of his burial near his birthplace in the Kentai Mountains, a rugged and remote region, but offer no precise coordinates. This has led modern expeditions to employ technology from the sky, using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar to scan vast areas for unnatural formations or hidden chambers. Despite these efforts, from Japanese scientific teams to independent explorers, no discovery has yielded conclusive proof. The landscape itself guards the secret. The legend of the diverted river is particularly compelling, as it presents a brilliant, permanent solution. If true, the river's course would have naturally changed over centuries, scattering sediment and completely camouflaging any trace of human activity. making the tomb archaeologically invisible. This mystery represents a profound clash of values. In an age where we document everything and seek to preserve history in museums, Genghis Khan's legacy asserts a different principle: the power of anonymity and the sacredness of a secret. His successors, including his grandson Kublai Khan, were also buried in secret locations, suggesting this was a core step tradition, a way for a leader's spirit to return to the landscape without becoming a focal point for political strife or desecration. The ongoing search, therefore, walks a fine line between historical curiosity and cultural respect. It asks whether some secrets are meant to stay buried, and if the legacy of a man who conquered from the Pacific to the Caspian Sea is ultimately better served by the enduring myth of his hidden grave than by the recovery of his remains. The empty space on the map where his tomb lies is a monument in itself, a testament to a final, unassailable command that even satellites and science cannot countermand. A map can be a confession of ignorance as much as a statement of knowledge. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul rests a fragment of a larger world map, drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. Its beauty is undeniable, a rich artifact of the age of exploration showing the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and the newly discovered lands of the Americas. Yet one small, tantalizing section at its southern edge has ignited a controversy that refuses to fade. The map appears to depict a landmass extending from the southern Atlantic, with a coastline that some researchers argue bears a striking resemblance to the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica, and it shows this land free of glacial ice. According to modern geological understanding, the Antarctic continent has been buried under its immense ice sheet for millions of years, with its true, ice-free coastline last visible perhaps 15 million years before any human walked the Earth. So how could a 16th-century navigator, working with the reports of explorers and the charts of his time, possibly have drawn such a thing? The map itself provides a clue in its own margins. Piri Reis wrote notes explaining that he compiled his work from 20 different source maps, some of which he described as dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. This admission is the heart of the mystery. Proponents of the map's anomalous accuracy suggest that Piri Reis had access to ancient source maps, copied and recopied over centuries, that preserved geographical knowledge from a lost, seafaring civilization with advanced cartographic skills. A civilization that might have explored the world in an era when Antarctica was partially ice-free. In this view, the Piri Reis map is not a product of 16th-century knowledge, but a fragile, surviving echo of a prehistoric world survey, a ghost in the archives of the Renaissance. Skeptics and mainstream historians offer a different, more grounded interpretation. They point out that the map contains significant errors and blank spaces, as one would expect for its time. The controversial southern landmass, they argue, is likely a composite misinterpretation. It could represent a speculative extension of the South American coast, blended with rumors of a great southern continent that European explorers believed must exist to balance the northern landmasses. Features might be drawn from distorted accounts of other coastlines, like the southern tip of Patagonia, stretched and misshapen by the limitations of contemporary navigation and reporting. The apparent accuracy, they suggest, is in the eye of the modern beholder, a case of selective pattern matching where we project our own knowledge of Antarctica's shape onto an old, ambiguous drawing. This debate transcends cartography and touches on a profound question about the transmission of knowledge. How much ancient understanding, painstakingly gathered over millennia, was lost in the fires of library burnings, the decay of parchment, or the simple cessation of a trade route? The Piri Reis Map, whether a miraculous relic or a fortunate mistake, forces us to consider that the age of exploration might not have been the beginning of global mapping, but a rediscovery of it. It stands as a fragile parchment bridge across time, inviting us to wonder what other charts might have once existed in the libraries of Alexandria or the archives of forgotten seafaring cultures, their secrets lost to the deep, leaving only a cryptic trace on the skin of a gazelle. A treasure map written not to fade is a promise meant to be kept. Among the ancient library of parchment known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in caves near Qumran, one document stands utterly apart. It is not made of fragile animal skin, but of thin, rolled sheets of copper, inscribed with letters hammered into the metal with such force that the scroll had to be carefully cut into strips to be unrolled and read. Dated to the 1st century of the Common Era, its text is not a religious psalm or a biblical commentary, but a stark matter-of-fact inventory. It lists 64 locations, and at each location, it describes a hidden deposit, itemizing staggering quantities of precious items, from tons of silver and gold to specific vessels and priestly vestments. The described wealth is monumental, a fortune that could only belong to a temple or a kingdom. This is the Copper Scroll, and it presents a riddle in 3 parts. Is it a literal guide to lost treasure, a symbolic text with a spiritual meaning, or an elaborate work of imagination? The choice of material itself is the first compelling clue. Copper is durable, resistant to rot and fire. Whoever created this record went to extraordinary lengths to ensure it would survive the centuries when the parchment scrolls around it might crumble. This suggests the information was considered vitally important, not meant for allegory but for future recovery. The language adds to the puzzle. Its Hebrew is more direct and colloquial than the literary styles of the other scrolls, reading like a practical set of instructions, though some of the described landmarks, like a certain Cave of the Pillar or the River of the Dome, have never been conclusively identified. For decades, this has fueled real-world expeditions, turning archaeologists and amateur treasure hunters alike into modern-day decipherers of an ancient landscape. They have paced dry riverbeds, scanned hillsides for hidden cavities, and probed the ruins of ancient aqueducts, following the scroll's cryptic directions. Yet not a single talent of silver or a single golden vessel from the list has ever been recovered. This complete absence of physical evidence opens the door to other interpretations. Some scholars propose the scroll is a record of the temple treasure from Jerusalem, hidden in the chaotic years leading up to the Roman siege in the year 70, a desperate attempt to preserve sacred wealth from plunder. Others wonder if its meaning was always symbolic, listing spiritual treasures or representing the scattered hopes of a community facing a time of great hardship. Could it even be a clever fiction, a piece of esoteric literature meant to convey a hidden teaching about faith and perseverance? The Copper Scroll endures because it masterfully blends the tangible and the elusive. It gives us precise numbers and concrete materials, making the treasure feel achingly real, while leaving the landmarks just vague enough to be lost to time. It transforms the rocky landscape of Judea into a vast, unsolved puzzle box. Each failed expedition does not disprove its potential truth, but deepens the mystery, asking us what it means when a society goes to such lengths to send a message into the future. Is the true treasure the material wealth, or is it the enduring human fascination with the search itself, a quest that keeps the memory of a lost world alive in the minds of those who still look for its hidden keys? Deep beneath the quiet rice paddies and green hills of China's Zhejiang province lies a hidden world that defies explanation. In 1992, a curious local farmer decided to pump the water out of a small, seemingly insignificant pond in the village of Longyou. As the water level dropped, he and his neighbors were stunned to find not a natural pool, but the entrance to an immense hand-carved cavern. This was no small grotto. It was the first of what would become 36 discovered caves, each an astonishing feat of underground engineering. Stepping inside is like entering the belly of a stone giant, the scale is almost overwhelming. The ceilings soar to heights of nearly 100 feet, supported by massive, evenly spaced pillars of solid rock that the builders left in place to hold up the mountain above. The walls and ceilings are not rough-hewn, but finished with a consistent, striking pattern of parallel chisel marks, running in uniform bands across every surface like a purposeful artistic signature. The architecture is deliberate and refined, with large chambers, connecting tunnels, and even pools and bridges carved from the living stone. The precision is what stops the breath. Every angle is sharp, every surface intentionally shaped. Yet for all this obvious skill and planning, the caves are a historical ghost. They appear in no ancient text, no local legend, no dynastic record. It is as if a mountain was hollowed out by a civilization that then chose to forget it ever happened. The logistical numbers alone are baffling. Archaeologists estimate that to create these caverns, well over 1 million cubic meters of solid sandstone had to be quarried, carved, and removed. That is a volume of stone equivalent to a large modern sports stadium. And here the mystery deepens in a very physical way. Where did all that rubble go? There is no massive debris field in the surrounding landscape, no telltale mountain of spoil. The stones simply vanished, suggesting an organized removal and disposal operation of staggering efficiency, likely involving thousands of workers over many years. For what possible purpose? The theories are as varied as the chisel marks on the walls. Some researchers propose they were imperial quarries, providing stone for a grand building project that was either never completed or has since been lost. Others see them as secret imperial tombs or ceremonial spaces, though no artifacts, inscriptions, or remains have ever been found inside to support this. The most intriguing suggestions lean into practical necessity. Perhaps they were vast underground reservoirs or flood control chambers designed to manage the region's water. Yet the elaborate decorative finishing seems to argue against a purely utilitarian function. The consistent, swirling tool marks covering every inch might hold a clue. Some experts believe they are not merely decorative but could have served an acoustic purpose, perhaps to dampen sound or to create specific echoes for ritual ceremonies. Without a single written word or artifact left behind, we are left to read the stones themselves. The Longyou Caves stand as a testament to a collective effort of breathtaking scale, a project that required advanced planning, sophisticated engineering, and a labor force operating with a single, clear vision. That such an endeavor could vanish from history's memory is perhaps the greatest mystery of all. It whispers of a chapter in China's ancient story that was deliberately closed or simply faded away, leaving only these silent, magnificent halls beneath the earth to question why they were ever made. Sometimes a single carving can illuminate a debate that spans centuries. Within the ancient temple complex of Dendera, dedicated to the goddess Hathor, a particular bas-relief carved into a crypt wall has become a modern battleground of interpretation. The image shows two figures, one holding what appears to be a large, elongated bulb or vase. Inside this object, a snake stretches its full length, its head pointed toward the end, while a cable-like line connects the base to a box held by a second figure. To the modern eye, the resemblance to a filament inside a glass light bulb, powered by an external energy source, is startling and immediate. This visual echo has fueled a compelling and controversial theory that the ancient Egyptians possessed, or at least understood, the principle of electric lighting. Proponents ask, how else could they have painted and carved the deep interiors of tombs and temples without leaving soot marks from torches or oil lamps? The Dendera relief, they argue, is a literal diagram of their technology, a secret preserved in stone. Mainstream Egyptology, however, reads the same stone with a completely different vocabulary. Scholars point to the rich symbolic language of Egyptian religious art. In this context, the bulb-shaped object is not a technological device, but a stylized lotus flower, a powerful symbol of creation and rebirth. The snake emerging from it represents the god Harsomptus, a form of Horus, and the scene illustrates a foundational myth, the emergence of the sun god from a lotus on the primordial waters at the moment of creation. The supporting figures are deities, not technicians, and the so-called cable is a ritual staff or a symbolic umbilical cord of divine power. The entire tableau is a theological statement, not an engineering schematic. This interpretation is supported by comparing the relief to countless other Egyptian artworks where similar motifs of lotuses, snakes, and gods are combined in clearly mythological scenes. The enduring fascination with the Dendera carving lies in this very tension. It is a perfect case study in how we project our own world onto the past. We live in an age defined by electricity, so we instinctively see a light bulb. The ancient Egyptians lived in a world defined by mythic cycles and symbolic correspondences, so they carved a story of cosmic birth. The debate asks a deeper question about how we understand ancient innovation. Must every advanced achievement be technological, or can profound sophistication reside in a complex, symbolic worldview that organized their entire reality? The temple walls at Dendera were not meant to document workshop inventions, but to encode eternal truths about the universe, ensuring the daily rebirth of the sun through ritual and representation. Whether one sees a lost invention or a profound metaphor, the relief continues to shine a light, not into dark tombs, but onto our own desire to find familiar echoes in the mysterious language of a distant world. A book can be judged by its size, but its story is measured by its weight in legend. The Codex Gigas, known more ominously as the Devil's Bible, is a manuscript of such immense physical and symbolic scale that it seems to defy the limits of human creation. Crafted in the early 13th century within the walls of a Benedictine monastery in Bohemia, it is the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the world, a leather-bound tome that stands nearly 3 feet tall, 20 inches wide, and almost 9 inches thick, requiring 2 people to lift its 165-pound weight. Its pages contain a stunningly complete collection of knowledge for its time, the entire Latin Vulgate Bible, historical chronicles, medical treatises, and even a guide to exorcism. Yet it is a single, stark illustration on page 290 that sealed its infamous reputation, a full-page portrait of the devil himself. The figure is depicted in vivid colors, a monstrous, clawed creature with horns, a forked tongue, and a body of eerie green, crouching alone on an empty page. This powerful image, placed directly opposite a magnificent rendering of the heavenly city, ignited a legend that has burned for centuries. The story claims the Codex was the work of a single monk, a scribe who had broken his monastic vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive. In desperation, he promised to create a book containing all human knowledge in a single night to glorify his monastery. As midnight approached and the task proved impossible, he prayed not to God but to the fallen angel Lucifer, who finished the manuscript for him in exchange for the monk's soul. The devil then added his own portrait as a signature. This tale of a supernatural pact is a compelling piece of folklore, but the true mystery lies in what the physical book reveals and what it stubbornly conceals. Modern analysis of the handwriting and ink confirms a startling fact. The vast majority of the text, over 600 pages, was indeed written by one person in a remarkably consistent hand. The uniformity is so complete that linguists believe it could represent 30 years of dedicated, solitary work. This reality transforms the legend from a ghost story into a profound human puzzle. Who was this scribe, and what drove such a monumental, lonely act of devotion? The content offers clues. The inclusion of practical medical texts alongside sacred scripture suggests it was intended as a complete library in one volume, perhaps a foundational treasure for a monastery or a gift to secure royal favor. The devil's portrait, rather than a mark of evil, may have served a deeply theological purpose for a medieval audience, a vivid reminder of the ever-present adversary, a visual lesson in the constant struggle between salvation and sin placed deliberately across from the vision of paradise. The Codex Gigas, therefore, stands at a crossroads of fear and faith, of superstition and staggering scholarship. It asks us to consider how a lifetime of quiet dedication can birth a legend of infernal speed, and how a symbol meant to warn of darkness became the very thing that made the book unforgettable. It is a testament not to a pact with the devil, but to the immense, enduring power of the human hand and spirit, capable of creating its own kind of miracle across decades of patient, ink-stained labor. Scattered across the highlands of Laos lies a landscape that feels both solemn and surreal. The Plain of Jars is exactly that, a series of grassy plateaus dotted with thousands of gigantic stone jars, some standing nearly 10 feet tall and weighing several tons. Carved from solid sandstone and granite during the Iron Age, over 1,000 years ago, these vessels rest in clusters, their open mouths pointing silently toward the sky. They are not hidden away but placed prominently on the land, a permanent installation whose purpose has been softened by time. The most widely accepted theory, based on early archaeological finds of human bone fragments and ash inside some jars, suggests they were part of an elaborate mortuary practice. They might have served as vessels for the departed, holding bodies for a form of sky burial, or as containers for the cremated remains or cherished possessions of important individuals. This interpretation paints a picture of a culture that honored its ancestors by integrating them into the landscape, turning the entire plain into a vast, open-air memorial park. Yet this explanation only deepens the practical mysteries. The stone for these jars was quarried from mountainsides miles away. How were these multi-ton containers, shaped with simple iron tools, transported across such rugged terrain? The methods remain speculative, perhaps involving log rollers, rope systems, and the coordinated labor of many people, a communal effort that speaks to the practice's deep social importance. The creators themselves are historical phantoms. No written records exist, and no substantial settlement ruins have been found directly linked to the jars, leaving their society's name, language, and daily life completely unknown. This silence is compounded by a tragic modern reality. During the mid-20th century conflict, the region was heavily bombed, leaving vast quantities of unexploded ordnance buried in the very soil that holds these ancient secrets. This ongoing danger has severely restricted archaeological exploration, making each careful survey a painstaking and perilous undertaking. The jars, therefore, stand as dual monuments to an ancient, mysterious culture and to the more recent hardships that have frozen them in time. They ask us to consider what it means to remember, and how the echoes of one era's practices can become entangled with the scars of another's conflicts, keeping the full story of a people just out of reach, guarded by stone and silence. Knowledge itself can become a phantom, haunting the corridors of power. Among the most tantalizing of these spectral collections is the lost library of Ivan the Terrible, the first Tsar of all Russia. The legend tells of a treasure not of gold but of parchment and vellum, a vast hoard of ancient Greek and Roman manuscripts that had vanished from Western Europe during the Middle Ages. Ivan, through his marriage to a Byzantine princess and his voracious intellectual appetites, was said to have amassed this priceless collection, safeguarding works by historians, philosophers, and scientists that were thought to be extinct. Then, following his death in 1584, the entire library seemingly disappeared from history. The story suggests it was hidden for safekeeping, perhaps in a secret chamber deep beneath the Moscow Kremlin or within the labyrinthine tunnels of the city itself. This is the ultimate bibliophile's mystery, a promise of rediscovering voices from antiquity that could reshape our understanding of the classical world. The romantic appeal is undeniable. The idea of a single, sealed room holding the lost plays of Sophocles, the complete histories of Livy, or scientific treatises by Archimedes, waiting for a modern explorer to turn the key. For centuries, this vision has motivated both formal expeditions and fevered speculation, from the time of Peter the Great to modern archaeological surveys. Searchers have probed basement walls, studied old architectural plans, and used ground-penetrating radar, all hoping to find the telltale void that signals a hidden chamber. Yet, no definitive evidence has ever surfaced. This enduring absence forces a more pragmatic question: did the library ever exist in the legendary form we imagine? Historians are divided. Some argue that Ivan did possess a significant personal library, as befitted a ruler of his stature, but that it was likely dispersed or destroyed in the many fires that ravaged wooden Moscow over the centuries. A great fire in 1571, just years before Ivan's death, could have been the culprit, turning irreplaceable manuscripts to ash. Others propose a more gradual fate, that the collection was simply broken up, its books absorbed into other monastic or private libraries over time, their origins forgotten. The legend persists, however, because it speaks to a profound human yearning. It represents the possibility of a second chance for lost knowledge, a counter-narrative to the tragic burning of the Library of Alexandria. It allows us to hope that the great works of antiquity did not all perish, that some were preserved in a distant, frozen stronghold, sleeping safely through the centuries. Whether a real collection awaiting discovery or a powerful myth born from fragments of truth, the lost library of the Moscow Tsars endures as a symbol. It reminds us that the greatest treasure a civilization can seek is not always material but intellectual, the recovery of a forgotten thought that can illuminate the path we all have walked. A stone trail across a dry lake bed looks like a signature from a ghost. In the heart of Death Valley, on a flat expanse called the Racetrack Playa, for decades visitors witnessed a scene that defied common sense. Heavy rocks, some weighing over 700 pounds, sat on the cracked, dry mud. Yet behind them, stretching for hundreds of feet, were long, meandering trails, as if the stones had slowly, purposefully, slid across the landscape under their own power. No human hand was moving them, no animal was pushing them, and for a long time no scientist could catch them in the act. They became known as the Sailing Stones, and their silent journeys crafted a perfect natural mystery. The simplest explanation felt impossible. How could a rock that heavy move on its own? The theories that emerged before an answer was found were wonderfully creative. Some speculated that powerful, localized gusts of wind might catch the stones just right, but the heaviest ones seemed far too massive for even desert winds to budge. Others wondered about magnetic forces or subtle shifts in the earth itself, but nothing fit all the evidence. The trails themselves were clues. Some were straight and true, others curved in elegant loops or sharp angles, suggesting the stones did not simply slide but turned and pivoted during their travels. The key to the puzzle, it turned out, was not in the stone or the wind alone, but in a delicate, fleeting partnership between water, ice, and a specific kind of winter day. In 2014, a team of researchers equipped with time-lapse cameras and precise weather monitors finally witnessed the event. They documented that during rare cold, wet winters, a shallow pool of rainwater would form on the playa. On nights when the temperature plunged, this thin layer of water would freeze into vast, window-pane sheets of ice, only a few millimeters thick. As the morning sun warmed the air, these ice sheets would begin to break up. Driven by a gentle breeze, these large, thin panels of ice would glide across the still wet surface of the playa, and if one encountered a rock, it would push it along, the stone floating on a cushion of soft mud and sliding ice. The trails were etched into the soft surface by the stone's path. This elegant solution solved the core mystery of agency, proving it was a natural, observable process. Yet, like any good mystery, the answer opened the door to more nuanced questions. The observed movements happened with relatively small stones under very specific conditions. The largest boulders, the true giants of the playa, have not been filmed in motion. Their epic, quarter-mile-long trails suggest they move under a rarer, more perfect alignment of conditions, perhaps when the ice sheet is just the right thickness and the wind is precisely steady. The exact physics of how a thin sheet of ice can impart enough force to move a 700-pound rock, and how that rock pivots to create looping trails, remains a subject of detailed study. The story of the sailing stones is a masterclass in how observation solves mystery. It reminds us that the world is full of phenomena that appear magical or inexplicable until we are patient enough and clever enough to watch them closely. It shows that even in one of the harshest environments on Earth, there is a hidden ballet of ice and stone, a performance that only happens when the stage is set just right and the audience is finally there to see it. The peat bogs of Northern Europe hold more than water and decay, they hold time itself. Across Denmark, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and Germany, the dark, acidic waters have yielded a series of astonishingly preserved individuals from the Iron Age, known simply as the Bog Bodies. These are not skeletons but people, their skin tanned to leather, their hair and facial features still recognizable, their last meals still in their stomachs. This remarkable preservation, a quirk of the cold, oxygen-poor, acidic environment that halts bacterial decay, offers an intimacy with the past that is both a gift and a profound puzzle. For while the bogs saved their physical forms, they stripped away the story of their final moments, leaving behind a series of ancient, unsolved cases. The evidence is often stark and unsettling. Many of the bodies show clear signs of a violent end, a broken bone, a deep cut to the throat, or the presence of a leather cord still wrapped tightly around the neck. Some appear to have been carefully placed in the bog, their bodies arranged with a deliberation that suggests something more than casual disposal. This combination of violence and ritual placement lies at the heart of the mystery. Were these individuals executed criminals, sacrifices offered to deities of the earth or water, or victims of a complex social ritual? Each body becomes a separate clue in a larger cultural investigation. The famous Tollund man, with his peaceful, sleeping face and the leather noose still around his neck, presents one narrative. His last meal was a simple porridge, suggesting he was not a starving outcast. The carefully tied knot and the lack of a struggle could point to a willing, or at least accepted, sacrificial role. In contrast, Lindo man, found in England, suffered multiple traumatic injuries, a blow to the head, a garroting, and a cut to the throat, a sequence some interpret as a triple death meant for a high-status offering. The varied evidence resists a single, simple explanation. Different communities across different centuries may have used the bogs for different purposes, a place for both capital punishment and sacred communication. The bogs themselves were likely seen as liminal spaces, gateways between the world of the living and the world of the gods or ancestors. Depositing a person there could have been a way to send a message, to restore balance, or to secure fertility for the land. Studying these individuals is an exercise in forensic empathy, where scientists use the tools of modern pathology to listen to the physical testimony of the past. Analysis of stomach contents tells us not just what they ate, but the season of their passing. Examination of their nails and hair can reveal periods of illness or malnutrition. This data builds a heartbreakingly personal profile, yet the motive for their death remains locked in the beliefs of a society that left no written records to explain itself. The bog bodies force us to confront the complexity of ancient belief systems. where actions we might view solely as violence were embedded in a cosmology of obligation, reciprocity, and fear. They are not merely victims, they are participants in a dialogue with the divine that we can observe but never fully overhear, their silent, preserved forms asking us to consider the immense weight of faith and the stark realities of life at the edge of the known world. The desert often preserves what history forgets. In the stark, silent expanse of the Taklamakan Desert in western China, the dry air and salty sand performed a miracle of conservation, cradling individuals whose appearance would stop an archaeologist in their tracks. These are the Tarim Mummies, dating back as early as 1800 years before the Common Era, and they present a visual and historical paradox. Their features are distinctly Caucasoid, with high noses, light hair, and tall frames. They are dressed not in silks, but in brilliantly colored woolen textiles, plaid patterns, and felted hats that look like they belong in the highlands of Europe, not the heart of Asia. Their very presence in this location, at this early date, asks a question that challenges the traditional map of the ancient world. Who were these people, and what journey brought them to this distant desert basin? The discovery immediately upended long-held assumptions about early East-West contact, suggesting that the exchange of people, ideas, and goods across Eurasia began not with the formal Silk Road over 1,000 years later, but with much earlier crisscrossing pathways of migration. The leading theory connects them to the vast Indo-European speaking peoples of the steppes, perhaps early Tocharian speakers or related groups. These nomadic pastoralists possessed the mobility and technology, like the wheel and the chariot, to undertake epic journeys across continental interiors. Genetic studies have supported this link, finding markers connecting the mummies to populations from the Black Sea region and Siberia. This suggests a migration eastward, a slow movement of families and herds along river valleys and mountain passes, eventually settling in the oasis communities of the Tarim Basin. There they adapted, raising livestock and weaving their distinctive fabrics, creating a unique cultural island far from their ancestral homelands. Yet their story is not one of simple replacement. The evidence points to a more nuanced integration. While their physical appearance and material culture were distinct, they lived alongside other groups. Their burial practices, which included placing baskets of grain and simple wooden markers, show local adaptations. This paints a picture not of an invading force, but of a community that maintained its identity while becoming part of the complex tapestry of early Xinjiang. The brightly colored clothing, preserved with almost impossible vividness, speaks volumes. The sophisticated weaving techniques and use of vibrant dyes indicate a rich textile tradition and a society that valued aesthetic expression, even in a harsh environment. The mummies are not silent statues, they are eloquent witnesses to a forgotten chapter of human resilience and connection. They tell us that the ancient world was far more interconnected, far earlier than our history books often allowed. Long before camel caravans carried silk and spices, people were moving, settling, and exchanging their very identities across the roof of the world, leaving behind in the dry sand a testament to journeys we are only beginning to trace. Deep in the tropical river deltas of Costa Rica, a different kind of geometric perfection lies half-buried in the earth. Scattered across the Diquis Delta are hundreds of stone spheres, some as small as a child's toy, others colossal, standing over 2 meters tall and weighing more than 16 tons. Carved from a hard volcanic rock called gabbro, these spheres are not rough approximations, but objects of startling precision, their surfaces smooth to a near-perfect roundness that challenges our understanding of pre-Columbian craftsmanship. Created by the Diquis culture between the years 500 and 1500 of the Common Era, they appear in clusters, sometimes aligned in straight lines or geometric patterns, and often found near the sites of ancient chiefdoms. Their very presence is a statement, but one spoken in a language we have forgotten how to hear. What message were these ancient artisans sending through such flawless, enduring form? The most immediate puzzle is one of technique. Without metal tools, how did the Dikwis people achieve such spherical accuracy? The process likely began with selecting a suitable boulder, then using other, harder stones to hammer and peck away the rough shape. The final smoothing, experts suggest, probably involved a combination of meticulous grinding with sand and water, and a technique of controlled heating and rapid cooling to fracture away thin layers of rock. This would have been a monumental investment of time and skill for each sphere, a communal project demanding patience and a shared vision of perfection. Yet the how is only a prelude to the deeper mystery of why. Why devote such immense effort to creating these silent, heavy orbs? One compelling theory views them through a celestial lens. Some groupings appear to align with astronomical events, such as the rising of certain stars or the solstice sun, suggesting the spheres could have functioned as a permanent, physical calendar or observatory, anchoring the community's ritual life to the cycles of the cosmos. Another perspective sees them as powerful social symbols. Their size and perfection may have denoted the status and authority of a specific chieftain or lineage, with the largest spheres serving as undeniable proclamations of power and territorial control placed near important settlements. There is also a fascinating spiritual dimension to consider. The perfect sphere, with no beginning and no end, is a universal symbol of wholeness, the cosmos, or deities in many world cultures. Perhaps they were embodiments of celestial bodies or sacred concepts, physical anchors for beliefs about harmony and balance. The mystery deepens with the discovery that many of these spheres were deliberately buried or relocated in antiquity, carefully hidden from view by the very people who made them. This act of concealment adds a poignant layer to their story. Were they buried to protect them from invading groups, or was their interment part of a ritual closing, a way to retire their power respectfully as beliefs changed? The silence of the Dikwis culture, which faded before European contact, means we may never decode their full significance. These spheres now sit in museum courtyards and jungle clearings, their perfect curves a testament to a lost standard of excellence. They remind us that some of history's most elegant questions are not written in text but shaped in stone, waiting for us to learn how to listen to their quiet, geometric language. Herodotus wrote of a vanishing so complete it feels like a parable. In his account, the Persian emperor Cambyses II, in a fit of rage against the priests of the oracle at Siwa, dispatched a massive army of 50,000 men from the city of Thebes. Their mission was to cross the desert, destroy the sacred site, and crush its defiance. The soldiers marched into the vastness of the western desert, and they simply never marched out. The Greek historian records that a monstrous sandstorm, a khamsin of legendary ferocity, rose up and engulfed the entire force, burying men, weapons, and animals under a permanent, shifting tomb of sand. From that day in 524 before the Common Era, the lost army of Cambyses passed from history into the realm of enduring mystery. The story possesses the stark power of a classical tragedy, a lesson in hubris and the overwhelming power of nature. Yet for modern historians and archaeologists, it presents a tantalizing and frustrating challenge. Where does legend end and verifiable fact begin? The scale of the alleged event is the first point of contention. An army of 50,000 represents a colossal logistical undertaking for the ancient world, a moving city that would have left a profound archaeological footprint, even in its demise. Searches for this footprint have been ongoing for more than a century, driven by the romantic and scholarly hope of finding what would be one of the most significant military discoveries of antiquity. Expeditions have employed ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the dunes, studied satellite imagery for anomalous patterns, and conducted careful surveys along ancient caravan routes. These efforts have yielded fascinating but ambiguous clues. In 2009, an Italian team announced the discovery of what they believed could be evidence, finding artifacts like a dagger blade, arrowheads, and pottery fragments in a remote area near the Siwa oasis. These objects were Persian in style and dated to the correct period. It was a compelling hint, a whisper of metal and ceramic in the sand. Yet, the discovery fell dramatically short of proving the historian's tale. There were no mass graves, no orderly lines of skeletons, no buried treasure of weapons that would confirm the loss of an entire army. The desert is a master of concealment and dispersal. A catastrophic sandstorm could indeed have disoriented and doomed a large force, but the aftermath would likely be scattered over miles, not neatly interred in a single location. The relentless wind would have scattered lighter materials and buried heavier ones under constantly migrating dunes, creating a puzzle with pieces spread across a landscape the size of a small nation. This leads many scholars to a more skeptical interpretation that Herodotus, often called the father of history but also a storyteller, might have been recounting a tale that contained a kernel of truth wrapped in dramatic exaggeration. The Persian Empire did have military outposts and engaged in campaigns in the region. A smaller detachment could have met with disaster in the desert, and over time, through oral tradition and political propaganda, the story could have been magnified into the epic loss of a grand army, serving as a cautionary metaphor about the limits of imperial power against the untamable desert. The mystery, therefore, sits precisely on that fascinating frontier between ancient testimony and material proof. It asks us how we weigh the words of a chronicler against the silent testimony of the earth. The search continues not just for bones and bronze, but for a way to calibrate our understanding of the past. Each fragment found is a potential key, yet the desert holds its cards close, allowing just enough evidence to keep the legend alive, but never enough to finally lay it to rest. It is a reminder that some historical truths may reside not in the certainty of a discovered grave, but in the enduring power of a story that warns every conqueror of the sands that patiently wait to reclaim their own. A single piece of linen has divided laboratories and congregations for generations. The Shroud of Turin is a length of ancient cloth, just over 14 feet long, bearing the haunting, sepia-toned imprint of a man who appears to have suffered the wounds of crucifixion. The faint image shows the front and back of a tall, bearded figure, with markings corresponding to scourging, a crown of thorns, and a wound in the side. For millions of the faithful, this is not an artifact but a sacred witness, the very burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth, miraculously imprinted with his likeness at the moment of resurrection. This profound claim of divine origin has placed the shroud at the center of an enduring collision between devotion and empirical analysis, creating a mystery that science has scrutinized but cannot fully dismiss. The pivotal moment in this modern investigation came in 1988, when 3 independent laboratories performed radiocarbon dating on a small sample of the cloth. Their unanimous conclusion placed its origin between the years 1260 and 1390, a medieval time frame that seemed to definitively label it as a creation of the Middle Ages, perhaps an elaborate devotional object. Yet, rather than settling the debate, this finding only deepened the mystery for many researchers and believers. Critics of the carbon dating argue the sample may have been contaminated, taken from a section of the cloth that was skillfully rewoven after a medieval fire, or chemically altered by centuries of handling and exposure. This question of the sample's purity has kept the door of possibility open, ensuring the scientific verdict is not universally accepted as the final word. An even more perplexing puzzle lies in the image itself. How was it made? No pigments, paints, or dyes have been found within the fibers. The coloration resides only on the very topmost microfibers of the thread, as if produced by a rapid, superficial degradation of the cellulose, an effect more akin to a scorch or a chemical change than an application of substance. The image has a three-dimensional encoded quality, with the intensity of the stain correlating precisely to the distance between the cloth and a hypothetical body, information that would be nearly impossible for a medieval artist to calculate and render without advanced technology. Decades of attempts by experts using medieval materials and techniques have failed to reproduce all of the shroud's complex characteristics: its perfect negative image, its lack of brushstrokes, and its precise anatomical detail. This failure of replication is the shroud's most compelling scientific enigma. It suggests that whatever process created the image, whether a natural chemical reaction, a release of energy from a body, or something beyond current understanding, remains unknown to modern science. Thus, the shroud exists in a unique space, a nexus where faith seeks tangible proof and science confronts an unexplained anomaly. It is less an object to be solved and more a mirror reflecting our own frameworks of belief and knowledge. For some, it is a powerful icon of faith, its very resistance to explanation affirming its sacred nature. For others, it is a fascinating historical and scientific puzzle, a medieval artifact of astonishing and unexplained craftsmanship. The continuous study it inspires, from microbiologists examining dust particles to historians tracing its complex journey before its first documented appearance in 1354, speaks to its enduring power to compel. It asks us not to choose definitively between relic and artifice, but to sit with the profound questions it raises about the limits of our tools, the nature of evidence, and the human longing to touch the intangible through the threads of time. Gravity seems to have taken a day off in the Virabhadra temple. Among the forest of carved pillars supporting the hall, one stands apart, or rather, does not stand at all. This is the famous hanging pillar of Lepakshi, a massive column of solid granite that appears to defy the most basic law of nature. Its ornate base hovers a clear few inches above the temple floor, leaving a visible gap through which devotees carefully slide thin cloths or pass their hands, a ritual believed to channel blessings and good fortune. Created in the 16th century under the Vijayanagara Empire, this pillar is not a standalone sculpture but an integral part of the temple's structural fabric, intricately carved with bands of divine figures and floral motifs that match its supporting neighbors. The visual effect is disorienting, a piece of the ceiling that has descended but refuses to fully land, held in a state of perpetual suspension. This creates a dual mystery, one of perception and one of profound engineering. Was this breathtaking gap a deliberate, calculated feat of the original architects, or is it the stunning result of centuries of subtle settlement, a happy accident that transformed a pillar into a miracle? For engineers who study it, the pillar presents a fascinating puzzle in stone mechanics. The temple complex is built on a bedrock of granite, and the pillars are not mere decorations but critical load-bearing elements. The design of the hanging pillar suggests an incredible understanding of weight distribution and balance. The craftsman may have intentionally carved its connection points to the ceiling and the surrounding pillars in such a way that the majority of the structural load is transferred through these upper linkages, leaving the base to kiss the air. This would require a masterful orchestration of forces, ensuring the entire hall remained stable while one of its key members performed its levitating act. Alternatively, some experts propose that a slight shift in the foundation over hundreds of years, perhaps from seismic activity or groundwater changes, caused the floor to sink away from the pillar's base, creating the gap by chance rather than by intricate design. Yet even this theory of accident speaks to the builder's genius, for the entire structure adapted to this movement without collapsing, a testament to the resilience of their construction techniques. For the millions of pilgrims who visit, the technical debate is secondary to the experience of wonder. The act of passing an object beneath the pillar is a physical engagement with the mysterious, a tangible connection to a place where human skill seems to have brushed against the divine. It symbolizes a core principle in Indian temple architecture, where the sacred space is not just a container for worship but an active participant in it, engineered to inspire awe and embody cosmological principles. The hanging pillar is both a structural member and a spiritual lever, a piece of stone that asks us to question what we know about weight, support, and the silent, enduring dialogue between devotion and the laws of physics. A continent can be born from a single word on a map. In the 1860s, a British zoologist named Philip Sclater was puzzling over a curious pattern in nature. He noted that fossils of a small, primitive primate, the lemur, were found in Madagascar and India, but not in Africa or the Middle East that lay between them. To explain this odd distribution, Sclater proposed a bold, speculative solution: a vast, now sunken land bridge that once connected these distant shores. He named this lost world Lemuria, after the creatures that seemed to mark its ghostly outline. This was not a wild fantasy, but a scientific hypothesis of its time, an attempt to use the best available knowledge to solve a genuine puzzle of biogeography. The Earth was believed to be a slowly cooling, contracting sphere, and lost continents were considered a plausible feature of a dynamic planet. Lemuria filled a gap in the data, providing a neat, terrestrial pathway for life to travel. Within decades, however, this scientific scaffold began to bear the weight of a far grander dream. The emerging field of plate tectonics provided the true explanation: the continents themselves were drifting. India had once been attached to Antarctica and Madagascar, drifting northward over millions of years, carrying its lemur fossils with it. There was no need for a sunken continent. The moving jigsaw puzzle of the Earth's crust explained it all. Geologically, Lemuria was obsolete, yet just as the theory was fading from science, it was being passionately reborn in the realm of myth. Theosophists, led by Helena Blavatsky, adopted Lemuria as the home of a root race in their elaborate spiritual cosmology. They transformed it from a land bridge for lemurs into a vast, advanced civilization, a cradle of humanity populated by spiritually enlightened hermaphroditic giants. This new Lemuria was not a victim of geological change, but of moral and cosmic catastrophe, a fallen paradise whose legacy was carried by its surviving descendants. This remarkable journey from scientific paper to esoteric scripture reveals something profound about how mysteries evolve. When a concrete explanation like plate tectonics closed one door, the human imagination opened another. Lemuria became a blank canvas in the Indian Ocean, a place to project deep-seated desires for a primordial, unified origin, a time before fragmentation, before the confusion of history. It answered a longing not for where lemurs came from, but for where we came from, offering a spiritual homeland that predated and surpassed all known cultures. The enduring power of the Lemuria myth, then, lies not in its failed geology, but in its successful symbolism. It illustrates how a gap in scientific knowledge can become a vessel for cultural yearning. It speaks to a persistent fascination with sunken worlds and forgotten golden ages, a theme it shares with Atlantis, though with a more mystical, Eastern inflection. In alternative history circles today, Lemuria often appears as a Pacific counterpart to its Atlantic sibling, a land of lost wisdom and advanced technology. Its story is a cautionary tale about the line between hypothesis and belief, and a testament to the human need for narratives that connect us to a deeper, more mysterious past. It reminds us that some of the most persistent mysteries are not those we find in the ground, but those we build in the mind to explain the silent spaces on the map of our own origins. The perfect clarity of quartz can hide a multitude of stories. Among the most captivating artifacts to emerge from the fog of the antiquities market are the crystal skulls, most famously the one linked to adventurer F. A. Mitchell Hedges. This life-sized carving from a single block of clear rock crystal is a masterpiece of optical precision, with a detachable jaw and a mesmerizing, lifelike quality. When it and others like it surfaced in the 19th and 20th centuries, they came with a breathtaking pedigree, said to be ancient Mesoamerican relics, perhaps from the Maya or Aztec, imbued with psychic power, the ability to see the future, or even to hold the knowledge of lost civilizations like Atlantis. They became icons of mystery, physical bridges to a magical past. Then, science asked its own questions. Under the scrutiny of modern microscopes, researchers found telltale marks invisible to the naked eye, microscopic patterns of abrasion that could only have been made by high-speed, rotary carving tools developed in the 19th century. The analysis was conclusive. These were not pre-Columbian artifacts painstakingly polished with sand and water over generations, but creations of a much more recent European workshop, likely from Germany or France in the 1800s. This revelation, however, did not dissolve the mystery, it simply transformed it. The central question is no longer where they came from, but why they were made, and why their legend proved so incredibly resistant to fact. The likely origin is a blend of commerce and romanticism. The 19th century was an era of intense fascination with the exotic, a time when private collectors and museums eagerly sought treasures from ancient cultures. A skilled artisan, recognizing this demand, could create a stunning object, give it a mysterious provenance, and command a tremendous price. It was a perfect forgery for its time, playing directly into Western fantasies about the mystical wisdom of lost indigenous empires. Yet the skulls transcended mere fraud to become powerful cultural symbols. Their form is universally resonant. The human skull is an icon of mortality, but rendered in flawless, transparent crystal. It transforms into something else entirely, a symbol of enlightenment, of a mind purified and made eternal. This inherent duality made them a perfect vessel for projection. In the 20th century, they were adopted by the growing New Age movement, which saw them as data storage devices from ancient seers or tools for healing and channeling cosmic energy. Their legend was fueled further by their appearance in popular films and novels, cementing their status as artifacts of power in the modern imagination. The enduring allure of the crystal skulls, therefore, tells us less about the ancient world and more about our own. They are a case study in how we create the mysteries we need. When faced with a beautiful, enigmatic object, the human desire for a wondrous narrative can override skeptical inquiry. They satisfy a deep longing for tangible magic, for a physical connection to a past that feels more spiritually advanced than our own technological present. The skulls remind us that an artifact's true power often lies not in its authentic origin, but in the stories we are willing to believe and the parts of ourselves we see reflected in its flawless, unblinking gaze. A story of faith can also be a map to an unknown shore. In the vivid world of medieval Irish monastic lore, one of the most captivating tales is the Navigatio Sancti Brendani, the Voyage of Saint Brendan. Written down around the 9th century, it recounts the abbot's incredible 7-year journey across the Atlantic Ocean with a band of monks in a small, wood-framed boat covered in animal hides. Their quest was not for trade or conquest, but for a spiritual destination, the Terra Repromissionis Sanctorum, the promised land of the saints, a paradise said to lie beyond the western horizon. The narrative is rich with marvels that feel lifted from scripture and folklore. They land on an island that turns out to be a slumbering sea monster. They are guided by a floating pillar of crystal, and they celebrate Easter on the back of a gigantic fish. For centuries, this was understood as a beautiful allegory, a metaphor for the monastic life as a perilous voyage toward spiritual perfection. Yet, within this pious adventure story, later readers began to notice descriptions that felt startlingly tangible. The text mentions islands with rivers, mountains covered in fog, and a great curdling sea that sounds eerily like the pack ice and icebergs of the North Atlantic. It speaks of landing on a lush, vast land, a place of incredible abundance. This geographical plausibility sparked a tantalizing question. Could this legend preserve a distorted memory of a real transatlantic journey made by Irish monks centuries before the Vikings? The idea is not as far-fetched as it might seem. We know from historical records that these early medieval monks were among Europe's most intrepid sailors, establishing remote hermitages on islands like Skellig Michael off the Irish coast and even reaching Iceland. Their vessels, known as curraghs, were remarkably seaworthy, capable of long voyages with skilled navigation by stars, currents, and bird flight. The hypothesis suggests that one such voyage, whether by Brendan himself or by other unnamed monks, might have been pushed far off course by storms, eventually making landfall somewhere in the New World. Proponents point to potential matches between the Navigatio's descriptions and real-world locations. The island of birds covered in sheep could describe the Faroe Islands. The mountain that spewed fire might be a volcano in Iceland. The final promised land, with its immense rivers and fertile soil, could be interpreted as Newfoundland or even the coast of New England. In the 1970s, a modern adventurer named Tim Severin famously demonstrated the voyage's physical possibility by building a period-accurate leather boat and sailing it from Ireland to Newfoundland, using only the methods described in the legend. His successful journey proved the route was navigable, though it could not prove it was ever taken. For most historians, the lack of any archaeological evidence, such as a Celtic cross or the remains of a monastic settlement in the Americas, keeps the story firmly in the realm of inspiring legend. The true power of St. Brendan's voyage, therefore, may lie precisely in its ambiguity. It exists in that fascinating middle ground between pious fiction and whispered history. It represents the powerful human impulse to push beyond the known world, driven equally by faith in God and a sheer, restless curiosity about what lies over the edge of the map. Whether allegory or obscured account, the tale stands as a testament to the courage of those early sailors who looked west into the endless ocean and dared to imagine a promised land waiting in the mist. A hill is not always just a hill. In the small town of Visoko, Bosnia and Herzegovina, a series of symmetrical, triangular landforms rise from the landscape with an almost geometric insistence. To a retired archaeologist named Semir Osmanagic, these were not natural hills, but the weathered remnants of the largest and oldest pyramids on Earth, constructed by a lost civilization over 12,000 years ago. He named them the Bosnian Pyramids, and his claims ignited a firestorm of controversy that burns to this day, pitting passionate belief against the slow, methodical consensus of mainstream science. At the heart of the debate is the simple, profound question of how we decide what is real in the distant past. Osmanagic and his supporters point to the shapes, visible from aerial photographs, and cite ground-penetrating radar scans that suggest underground tunnels and what they interpret as man-made concrete blocks. They speak of energy beams and healing frequencies emanating from the site, weaving a narrative of an advanced, forgotten culture that rewrites human history. For many visitors and alternative history enthusiasts, the idea is electrifying, a chance to witness a paradigm-shifting discovery that conventional academia has overlooked. It taps into a powerful desire to find evidence of a grander, more mysterious human story, one where ancient builders possessed knowledge we have since lost. Geologists and archaeologists from established institutions, however, look at the same landscape and see something entirely different. They identify the formations as natural flat-topped hills, known as mesas, composed of layered sedimentary rock and clay, shaped over millennia by the forces of erosion. The so-called tunnels, they argue, are common geological fractures, and the concrete-like material is a natural sedimentary conglomerate called breccia that often forms in such settings. From this perspective, the Bosnian pyramids are a classic case of pareidolia, the human tendency to see meaningful patterns, like faces in clouds or pyramids in hillsides where none exist. The conflict is less about the hills themselves and more about two fundamentally different ways of engaging with the past. One is driven by a top-down vision, a compelling story that seeks evidence to support it. The other follows a bottom-up methodology, gathering data, forming hypotheses, and subjecting them to rigorous peer review, often arriving at less spectacular but more empirically grounded conclusions. This tension highlights a crucial aspect of how mysteries capture the public imagination. The official narrative of history can sometimes feel settled and sterile, while the possibility of a hidden truth, a secret chapter written in the very hills we walk upon, offers a thrilling sense of participation in a great revelation. The ongoing discussion around Visoko ultimately serves as a living lesson in critical thinking. It asks us to consider the weight we give to different kinds of evidence and to examine our own motivations for believing one explanation over another. Whether natural wonders or human-made monuments, these silent hills continue to shape a modern dialogue about discovery, proof, and our eternal fascination with the possibility that the greatest secrets are still lying just beneath our feet, waiting for the right eyes to see them. A solitary stone cylinder stands in a quiet Newport park, its arched windows gazing out over the harbor. The Newport Tower is an architectural anomaly, a two-story round structure built from rough fieldstone, its origins shrouded in a debate that cuts to the core of American history. The official record places it in the 17th century, likely a windmill built by Benedict Arnold, the early colonial governor whose name appears on a land deed. Its design, some argue, resembles known English post mills of that era, a practical piece of colonial industry. Yet, from the moment it captured public attention, this simple explanation has felt insufficient to many. The tower's construction, with its 8 columns and round form, looks nothing like the typical square stone towers of later colonial America. Its architectural DNA seems to whisper of older, distant shores. This has fueled a compelling counter-narrative that the tower is a relic of pre-Columbian European contact, a beacon left by Norse explorers, or perhaps even the enigmatic Knights Templar seeking refuge across the Atlantic. Architectural analysis becomes a battle of interpretations. Proponents of the medieval theory point to the tower's similarities to round churches built by the Templars in Europe, particularly the use of 8 supporting columns, a number rich with symbolic meaning. They note the alignment of certain windows with celestial events like the summer solstice sunrise, suggesting a function beyond mere milling. Carbon dating of mortar samples has yielded a wide range of dates from the colonial period back to the 1400s, but these results are hotly contested, with critics arguing that old carbon from shell fragments in the limestone could skew the readings. The scientific evidence, rather than settling the argument, has become another layer of the dispute. This is why the Newport Tower is more than an old building. It is a physical Rorschach test. What you see in its arches and stones often reflects what you believe about the larger story of the Americas. To see a colonial windmill is to affirm the traditional historical narrative, where sustained European settlement began in the late 15th century. To see a Viking outpost or a Templar chapel is to embrace a more complex, layered history, one where the Atlantic was crossed and recrossed long before Columbus, leaving behind cryptic markers. The tower's enduring mystery speaks to a deep human desire to find tangible proof of these shadowy voyages, to touch a stone laid by a Norse mason or a Crusader knight on American soil. It challenges the official record not with words but with its silent, stubborn presence, asking us who gets to write history and what evidence we are willing to accept when the story is written not on parchment but in stone and mortar. The Tower of London is a fortress built to keep secrets. Within its cold stone walls in the summer of 1483, 2 young boys vanished from the pages of history. They were Edward V, just 12 years old, and his younger brother Richard, Duke of York, aged 9. The sons of the recently deceased King Edward IV, they had been placed in the tower by their uncle and protector, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, for what was said to be their own safety before Edward's coronation. The coronation never came. Instead, their uncle declared the boys illegitimate, claimed the throne for himself as King Richard III, and the princes were never seen in public again. By that autumn, rumors of their deaths were already spreading like a chill fog from the Thames. This is not a mystery of ancient artifacts or lost continents, but a deeply human tragedy, a cold case where the victims were children and the prime suspect became a king. The traditional narrative, immortalized by William Shakespeare and Tudor historians, is stark. Richard III ordered their deaths to secure his stolen crown. Yet, in the centuries since, not a single piece of contemporary evidence has surfaced to prove it. No eyewitness account, no deathbed confession, no document bearing his seal. The boys simply faded into the stone, leaving behind a vacuum of fact that has been filled with passionate speculation for over 500 years. The theories that have emerged form a spectrum of possibilities, each with its own compelling logic and frustrating gaps. The first and most enduring is indeed murder, but the question of who gave the order remains open. While Richard had the clearest motive and opportunity, others in his fractious court also benefited from the prince's disappearance. Could a powerful noble like the Duke of Buckingham have acted on his own, either to curry favor with Richard or to destabilize his reign? A second theory suggests the boys did not die by violence at all, but succumbed to illness while in confinement, a tragedy their uncle then concealed to avoid appearing negligent or, worse, divinely punished. The most tantalizing possibility, however, is that of survival. In the years following Richard's own death at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, several young men emerged claiming to be one of the lost princes, most notably the charismatic Perkin Warbeck, who gained international support for his claim. While Warbeck was ultimately captured and executed, his story highlights how potent the idea of a surviving heir was, and how the absence of a body allowed hope and political opportunism to flourish. The mystery reached a dramatic, modern turning point in 1674, when workers renovating the tower discovered a wooden chest buried beneath a staircase leading to the chapel. Inside were the small skeletons of 2 children. King Charles II, believing them to be the princes, had the remains placed in a marble urn in Westminster Abbey, where they rest today. In 1933, the bones were briefly examined, and the conclusions were tantalizing but inconclusive. The ages and sexes seemed to match, and there were signs the older child may have had a mild facial deformity, consistent with a portrait of Edward V. Yet, without modern DNA testing, which has not been permitted, the identification cannot be confirmed. This is the heart of the enigma. Even when we think we have found them, they remain just out of reach. The fate of the princes in the tower endures because it is more than a historical whodunit. It is a story about how narratives are built in the absence of facts. The victorious Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII after defeating Richard, had every reason to blacken his predecessor's name, cementing his own dynasty by painting Richard as a monstrous usurper. The mystery thus became a powerful political tool, shaping the legacy of a king and an entire era. It asks us to consider how the silence of 2 children can echo louder than the proclamations of kings, and how, in history, sometimes the most powerful truths are not the ones we know, but the ones we are forever compelled to seek. The silent gaze of the Moai is not the only voice from Easter Island's past. Scattered across a handful of wooden tablets and ceremonial objects is a different kind of communication, a series of intricate glyphs carved in a curious, alternating direction known as reverse Boustrafedin. This is Rongorongo, a script that flows like a serpent, one line reading left to right. the next right to left, with the glyphs themselves flipped upside down to face the proper direction. It is the only known indigenous writing system to emerge from the entire Polynesian Triangle, a stunning intellectual achievement on the world's most isolated inhabited island. Yet, for all its sophistication, it speaks a language we can no longer hear. The glyphs themselves are a captivating blend of the familiar and the abstract, depicting human figures in postures of dance or prayer, birds, fish, plants, and geometric shapes that might represent celestial bodies or tools. They are clearly a systematic notation, arranged in neat lines with clear separators, suggesting a structured sequence of information. This leads to the foundational debate: is Rongorongo a true writing system, capable of recording the full complexity of spoken language, or is it a form of proto-writing, a mnemonic device meant to jog the memory of a trained reciter? The distinction is crucial, for it determines whether these tablets hold specific narratives or are more like symbolic prompts for ritual chants. The tragedy is that the key to this puzzle was lost in the devastating cultural disruption that followed European contact in the 18th century. Diseases, slave raids, and social collapse decimated the Rapa Nui population and their learned class. By the time outsiders took a serious interest in the tablets in the late 19th century, there was reportedly no one left alive who could read them. The knowledge died with the last elders, severing the link between the carved symbol and the spoken word. Modern attempts at decipherment have been hampered by this very isolation. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, which presented the same text in 3 known scripts, Rongorongo has no bilingual key. Linguists have tried to match the glyphs to the reconstructed vocabulary of Old Rapa Nui, but without a starting point, the task is like trying to solve a crossword puzzle where every clue is written in the same unknown language. Some researchers have proposed fascinating connections, suggesting certain glyph sequences might record genealogies, creation myths, or even astronomical observations for tracking planting cycles. One compelling theory, noting the prevalence of frigate bird and tropic bird motifs, posits that the tablets could be ritual texts related to the island's intense birdman cult. Yet, without confirmation, each interpretation remains a scholarly hypothesis. The wooden tablets themselves, often made from rare driftwood, are now precious and fragile, held in museums far from their island home. They are more than artifacts, they are the stranded thoughts of a culture that expressed its worldview in monumental statues and perhaps in these delicate carved lines. To look at Rongorongo is to feel the weight of a double loss, first of the people who created it, and then of the meaning they so carefully inscribed. It stands as a profound reminder that writing is not just a technology, but a covenant between generations, a thread of memory that, when cut, leaves behind the shape of knowledge without its substance. The script remains the most intimate and elusive of Easter Island's mysteries, a direct message from the past that we can see but cannot read, a final, elegant code from a people who mastered stone and sea, only to have their own story rendered silent by the tides of history. A photograph can hold a ghost. In the 1950s, an explorer named Oscar Rafael Padilla Lara claimed to have encountered something startling in the dense jungles of Guatemala. He reported finding and later published a photograph of a colossal stone head. It was not the stylized monument of a known Mesoamerican culture, but something that felt eerily out of place. The face, carved from what appeared to be pale sandstone, gazed upward with rounded, almost puffy features, a broad nose and thin lips. To Padilla and others who saw the image, it looked distinctly Caucasian, an artistic anomaly in the pre-Columbian world. The head was said to be immense, perhaps as tall as a multi-story building, half buried in the verdant undergrowth, as if the earth itself was slowly reclaiming a secret it was never meant to reveal. Then, as quickly as it entered the historical record, it vanished. Subsequent expeditions to the alleged location found nothing, no giant head, no quarry site, not even fragments of worked stone. The jungle had closed its green curtain once more, leaving behind only a grainy black and white image and a story that refused to die. This is the mystery of the giant stone head of Guatemala, an enigma that exists almost entirely in the realm of testimony and faded paper, a modern legend born from a single, elusive snapshot. The debate it sparks is a fundamental one about evidence and belief. Skeptics offer a range of plausible explanations. The photograph itself is of poor quality, making definitive analysis difficult. It could be a natural rock formation, one of those countless pareidolia moments where wind and water erosion conspire to create a face-like shape that a hopeful eye interprets as sculpture. Alternatively, it might have been a deliberate hoax, a modern carving created for attention or tourism, perhaps even a misplaced prop from a film set, its origins then obscured by jungle and time. Without the physical artifact to examine for tool marks, weathering patterns, or geological context, the photograph alone cannot bear the weight of a paradigm-shifting claim. For proponents, however, the disappearance is not proof against its existence, but part of the mystery's haunting character. They argue that the Guatemalan jungle is vast and profoundly difficult to navigate, a place where ancient cities like El Mirador lay hidden for centuries. A monumental object could be swallowed by vegetation, obscured by landslides, or even deliberately hidden or destroyed. The head's unusual style is the core of its allure, suggesting the possibility of a forgotten contact, a seafaring culture from across the Atlantic that left a solitary marker, or even a completely unknown civilization whose other traces have yet to be found. This idea taps directly into the same enduring fascination as the crystal skulls or speculative histories of pre-Columbian transoceanic travel, challenging the established narrative of isolated New World development. The stone head, therefore, is more than a potential artifact, it is a symbol. It represents the tantalizing possibility that the remote corners of our world still hold monumental surprises, that our maps of the ancient past are not complete. It lives on not in a museum display case, but in the space between a skeptic's rational dismissal and a dreamer's stubborn hope. The story asks us how we deal with historical outliers, with single points of data that do not fit our models. Do we dismiss them as noise, or do we allow them to whisper that there might be whole chapters missing from our story? Whether a trick of light and stone, a clever fabrication, or a genuine relic of a lost world, the giant head's legacy is its persistent question mark. It reminds us that the Earth has not yet surrendered all its secrets, and that some mysteries choose to hide not in tombs or temples, but in the fading memory of a photograph, waiting for the day the jungle decides to look up and show its face once more. The sea holds its secrets in a different kind of silence, one of absence rather than presence. In December of 1872, the British merchant brigantine Mary Celeste was spotted drifting aimlessly in the calm Atlantic between Portugal and the Azores. The crew of the passing ship Dei Gratia, recognizing a vessel in potential distress, sent a boarding party across. What they discovered was not a shipwreck, but a profound and unsettling vacancy. The Mary Celeste was perfectly seaworthy, her sails partially set, her hull sound, and a 6-month supply of food and water in her stores. The cargo of industrial alcohol remained securely lashed in the hold. In the captain's quarters, personal belongings lay undisturbed. A child's toy rested on a bed, and the logbook's last entry was routine, noting nothing amiss. Yet the 10 people who had been aboard, Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7 were gone. They had vanished as completely as if the ocean had opened beneath them and closed again without a ripple. No lifeboat was on board, and no trace of the missing was ever found. This was not a scene of chaos or violence, but of orderly abandonment, a decision made under circumstances we can only guess. The immediate theories tried to fill the void with logic. Perhaps fumes from the alcohol cargo had built up, leading the crew to believe an explosion was imminent, causing them to hastily take to the lifeboat. Yet the cargo was intact and the hatch seals were secure. Maybe a sudden waterspout or a minor seaquake had panicked them into abandoning a ship that was, in reality, in no real danger. The possibility of piracy was considered, but nothing of value was taken, and there were no signs of a struggle. Mutiny seemed unlikely given Captain Briggs's excellent reputation and the presence of his own family. Each explanation unravels against the physical evidence of the ship itself, a vessel found in a state of suspended animation, a floating question mark. The enduring power of the Mary Celeste story lies in this pristine mystery. It became the archetype of the ghost ship, not a rotting hulk, but a perfectly functional machine whose human element had been cleanly extracted. It represents a rupture in narrative, a story that begins and continues, but whose central chapter is a blank page. We have the setting, the characters, and the aftermath, but the pivotal event, the moment of decision that sent 11 souls into a small boat on the open ocean, is lost forever. This absence forces us to confront the terrifying caprice of the sea and the fragile line between routine and catastrophe. It is a reminder that history is not just made of events we record, but of the countless moments that slip between the lines of a logbook, leaving behind only the vessel, drifting silently, waiting for an answer that never comes. The stones themselves seem to look beyond the horizon, tracing lines of sight we can only measure with satellites. This 38th mystery is not about a single object, but a pattern, a silent network of alignment that connects ancient monuments across the globe. From the solstice sunrise framed by Stonehenge to the shafts within the Great Pyramid pointing towards specific stars, our ancestors consistently anchored their greatest structures to the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. This was far more than decoration. It was a fundamental way of ordering their world, embedding the sacred cycles of time into the very landscape. The mystery deepens, however, when we ask how deep this connection truly ran. Was this a universal human response to the sky, or evidence of a shared, perhaps even coordinated, ancient science? The most well-understood alignments are those with clear, practical purposes. The Pyramid of Khufu at Giza is oriented with near-perfect cardinal directions, its sides facing true north, south, east, and west with an error of less than a fraction of a degree. This required astonishingly precise astronomical observation, likely tracking the circumpolar stars to find the axis of the Earth's rotation. At Newgrange in Ireland, a 5,000-year-old passage tomb is designed so that the rising sun on the winter solstice floods its inner chamber with a narrow beam of light for just 17 minutes, a dramatic symbol of rebirth at the year's darkest point. These are not accidents, they are engineering triumphs that demonstrate a sophisticated, long-term understanding of celestial mechanics, used to mark seasons, schedule planting, and time religious ceremonies. The purpose here is clear, a dialogue between earth and sky that governed both survival and spirituality. Yet, other proposed connections stretch this idea to its limits, venturing into the realm of what are often called ley lines. This concept, popularized in the 20th century, suggests that ancient sacred sites were deliberately placed along straight lines of mystical energy that crisscross the globe. Proponents point to alignments connecting, for instance, Stonehenge to various old churches and ancient mounds across the English countryside. While it is true that humans often built along straight tracks and used prominent landmarks for navigation, the scientific community largely views grand ley line theories with skepticism. The challenge is one of statistical probability. Given the sheer number of ancient sites dotting any landscape, finding straight lines that connect a few of them by chance is almost inevitable. Furthermore, the sites linked in these theories often span thousands of years, built by different cultures with no possible contact, making a coordinated global plan historically implausible. So where does the genuine mystery reside? It lives in the space between provable astronomical intent and the haunting feeling of pattern. It asks whether different cultures, independently observing the same heavens and feeling the same pull to honor them in stone, might arrive at similar architectural principles, creating what looks like a web of knowledge but is actually a testament to a shared human experience. Or could there have been threads of exchanged understanding, lost to us now, that carried basic principles of sacred geometry and alignment along early trade routes? The alignment of ancient monuments ultimately probes the depth of a pre-literate worldview. For societies without written calendars, the sky was the ultimate clock and scripture. Aligning a temple to a solstice sunrise was not just setting a date, it was participating in the cosmic order, ensuring the sun would return, the rains would come, and the community would endure. This profound connection to the cosmos may be the most important alignment of all, a spiritual North Star that guided their hands as they raised stones toward the very lights they sought to understand. Metallurgy can be a form of alchemy, turning base elements into objects of enduring defiance. In the heart of Delhi, a quiet courtyard holds a testament to this forgotten art, a pillar that has watched empires rise and fall for over 16 centuries. The Iron Pillar of Delhi stands just over 7 meters tall, forged from a single, massive piece of wrought iron around the year 400 of the Common Era, during the reign of the Gupta dynasty. Its surface is smooth, bearing a 6-line Sanskrit inscription praising a king named Chandra, likely Chandragupta II. But the pillar's true inscription is not in its words, but in its very substance, for it possesses a quality that seems to border on magic, an almost complete resistance to rust. In a city with hot, humid summers and monsoon rains, where modern steel structures require constant maintenance to fight corrosion, this ancient iron column has stood exposed to the elements for 1,600 years with only the most superficial, stable patina. It is a technological miracle that modern science can explain but not perfectly reproduce. The secret lies not in a mystical alloy, but in the brilliant, perhaps accidental, craftsmanship of its creators. Modern spectroscopic analysis has revealed the pillar's unique recipe, a high phosphorus content and a surprisingly low amount of sulfur and manganese. This specific chemical cocktail is the key to its longevity. When the iron, rich in phosphorus, was exposed to air and moisture, it did not form the flaky, destructive rust that eats away at modern steel. Instead, it developed a thin, protective film of iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate, a stable, glass-like layer that acts as a shield, preventing oxygen and water from penetrating deeper into the metal. This passive layer is self-healing to a degree, meaning minor scratches or weathering are often sealed by the formation of new protective compounds. The marvel is that this was achieved without any modern understanding of chemistry. The Gupta-era blacksmiths were working with materials as they found them, using iron ore that naturally contained these impurities. Their genius was in their process, a masterful control of the bloomery furnace technique. Forging such a colossal single piece of iron, estimated to weigh over 6 tons, was a monumental feat in itself. It would have required a massive furnace, countless bellows operated by teams of workers to reach the necessary temperature, and incredible skill in hammer, welding, and shaping the white-hot metal on an anvil. They were not just making a monument, they were conducting a symphony of heat, force, and material on a scale rarely seen in the ancient world. The enduring mystery is not whether we understand the pillar's corrosion resistance, but whether its perfect recipe was a deliberate innovation or a happy accident of local ore and traditional technique. Did the master smiths of the Gupta court recognize that iron from a particular source yielded a more durable product, and consciously seek it out? Or was this pillar simply one magnificent result of a standardized process that, through generations of trial and error, had unknowingly optimized for longevity? Attempts to forge a perfect modern replica have stumbled, as controlling the precise conditions to form that perfect protective layer, while also achieving the pillar's scale and purity, remains a challenge. The pillar, therefore, is more than a relic, it is a benchmark. It represents a peak of ancient empirical science, where observation and practiced skill achieved a result so advanced it quietly mocks the passage of time. It asks us to reconsider what we mean by lost knowledge, for sometimes the secret is not a forgotten formula in a scroll, but the intimate, tactile wisdom of a craftsperson's hands, a knowledge written in fire and hammer blows, now silent but enduring in a single, rustless shaft of iron. The true measure of a city's power is sometimes written in the suddenness of its silence. The Greek city-state of Helike was no minor settlement, but a prominent and wealthy member of the Achaean League, famed for its sanctuary dedicated to Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes. In the winter of 373 before the Common Era, the city's entire existence was rewritten in a single, terrible night. Ancient historians like Strabo and Diodorus Siculus recorded the event with awe. A massive earthquake struck the region, violently shaking the land. The ground beneath Helike liquefied, and the city sank into the earth. Then, as survivors fled, a colossal tsunami from the nearby Corinthian Gulf rushed in, sweeping over the ruins and submerging them beneath the sea. By morning, Helike was gone, erased from the coastline as if it had never been. For centuries, it existed only as a cautionary tale in classical texts, a legendary city punished by an angry god, its exact location fading into the realm of myth. Sailors would later claim they could see the bronze statue of Poseidon still standing beneath the waves, a ghostly sentinel guarding a lost domain. This transformation from a bustling political center to a story told to frightened children is the first layer of the mystery, how completely a place can vanish from both geography and living memory. The search for Helike became a quest to bridge that gap, to find the solid proof beneath the legend. For nearly 2 millennia, explorers and archaeologists scoured the coastal plains of the Peloponnese, but the landscape, reshaped by silt from rivers and centuries of seismic activity, gave no clear answers. The breakthrough came not from digging but from a new way of seeing. In the late 1980s and early 90s, a dedicated team led by archaeologists Dora Katsanopoulou and Stephen Soter employed a multidisciplinary strategy. They studied historical accounts, analyzed geological cores from the coastal plain, and used magnetometry, a technology that can detect buried structures by mapping magnetic anomalies in the soil. Their work revealed something astonishing. The lost city was not under the sea, but buried several meters beneath the fertile farmland and modern villages inland. The cataclysm had been even more complex than the ancient stories described. The earthquake had caused a phenomenon called soil liquefaction, where solid ground temporarily behaves like a fluid, causing buildings to topple and sink. A large block of the city's land then slid into a lagoon created by the tsunami, and over the centuries, river sediments quietly sealed the tomb, pushing the coastline further out and burying the ruins under layers of mud and soil. Excavations finally began to uncover the reality: stone foundations of buildings, cobbled streets, pottery, and coins, all dating to the 4th century before the Common Era, frozen in a moment of disaster. The discovery transformed Helike from a mythical lesson into a precise archaeological case study. It provides a tangible timeline for a historical catastrophe, offering clues about ancient construction techniques, daily life, and the terrifying speed of a natural disaster. The mystery of Helike, therefore, is no longer about its location, but about its legacy. It shows us with startling clarity how a vibrant community can be so thoroughly erased from the surface world that its very existence becomes a subject of debate. Its recovery is a testament to the patience of science, demonstrating how modern tools can listen to the faint echoes left in the earth, pulling a city back from the realm of story and into the light of history. It asks us to consider how many other places whose names we have forgotten still lie in silent wait beneath our feet, their stories paused mid-sentence, waiting for the right question to be asked. The Ubaid period holds the quiet dawn of Mesopotamian civilization, a time before writing, before kings, before the great gods of Sumer were given their famous names. From this foundational era, roughly from 5,500 to 4,000 years before the Common Era, archaeologists have unearthed a collection of artifacts that feel strangely disconnected from everything that came after. These are the Ubaid lizardmen figurines, small terracotta statues that portray humanoid forms with elongated heads, almond-shaped, slitted eyes, and distinctly reptilian features. Some stand upright, others are seated, and most hauntingly, many are depicted cradling infants against their slender bodies. They are not crude sketches, but carefully modeled works, their postures deliberate, their expressions serene yet utterly alien. They emerge from the soil as silent envoys from a world whose language of belief we have completely forgotten. What do these figures represent? And why does their imagery seem to vanish from the archaeological record, leaving no clear descendant in the later pantheons of the region? The most immediate interpretation is that they are deities. In a world where the natural environment was both provider and threat, creatures that could move between land and water, that shed their skin, might have been seen as powerful symbols of transformation, fertility, or protection. A lizard god or goddess holding a child could be a divine guardian of birth, a promise of survival for the vulnerable young in a challenging world. This theory connects them to a universal human impulse to seek protection in the forms of the natural world, to embody life-giving forces in tangible shapes. Yet another possibility steps out of the realm of the purely divine and into the ceremonial. Perhaps these are not gods, but priests or ritual participants. The reptilian features might represent elaborate masks and costumes worn during important rites, possibly related to healing, initiation, or appeals for fertility. The figurines could then be votive offerings, left by individuals or families seeking the blessing of the ritual, or even representations of ancestors who once performed these sacred roles, forever memorialized in their ceremonial guise. This view turns them from objects of worship into participants in a forgotten performance, a glimpse of the living practice behind the belief. There is a third, more speculative thread, one that acknowledges how deeply our own modern perspective shapes what we see. To our eyes, trained by science fiction and folklore, the elongated skulls and slanted eyes immediately suggest something other than human, something not of this world. This has led to inevitable but highly controversial interpretations connecting the figurines to ancient astronaut theories or encounters with non-human intelligences. Mainstream archaeology gently sets this idea aside, not because the question of what inspired the form is invalid, but because it leaps far beyond the available evidence. The true weight of the mystery lies not in extraterrestrial speculation, but in a profound historical silence. The Ubaid culture is a precursor, the foundation upon which the spectacular Sumerian civilization was built. We know the Sumerians well. We have their god lists, their epic poetry, their detailed temple records. Yet in all that rich later mythology, with its gods of the sky, earth, and fresh water, there is no clear, direct lineage for these lizard-like beings. It is as if an entire layer of spiritual imagination was paved over, its stories lost, its deities renamed or forgotten as new peoples, new ideas, and new political structures rose to power. The figurines, then, are fossils of a lost spiritual ecology. They are the tangible evidence that the earliest known societies in this cradle of civilization held beliefs complex enough to produce symbolic art, but those beliefs did not survive the tumultuous journey into history. They offer a cryptic glimpse into a mindset that viewed the boundary between human and animal, between nurturer and creature, as fluid and meaningful. Each time one is carefully brushed clean of soil, it asks us to consider how much of the human story is written not in texts, but in clay, and how many chapters of that story have crumbled back into the earth, leaving behind only the most durable fragments of their once vibrant inner world. A story can be carved in stone, yet remain as elusive as smoke. In 1938, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-Te is said to have made a staggering discovery in the remote Bayan Ha Mountains. According to the controversial account that later emerged, his team entered a cave system and found not ancient tools or pottery, but rows of neat burial niches. Within these niches lay skeletal remains that were described as unusually small and delicate, with oversized skulls. Scattered nearby were hundreds of stone discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter, with a perfect hole in the center and a fine, spiral groove running from the center to the rim. Upon closer inspection, this groove was allegedly not a decorative pattern, but a continuous line of tiny, unknown hieroglyphic characters. The narrative takes its most extraordinary leap when, years later, a researcher claimed to have deciphered the inscriptions. The story says the discs told a tragic tale of a peaceful people called the Dropa, whose spacecraft crashed in the mountains thousands of years ago, stranding them on Earth where they were hunted and could not repair their vessel. The small skeletons were presented as the remains of these stranded extraterrestrial visitors. It is a perfect storm of a mystery, combining ancient artifacts, strange biology, and a lost interstellar narrative. Yet, when subjected to the rigors of verification, the entire structure evaporates. No major archaeological institution has a record of Kai Pu-Te's expedition. The discs themselves have never been made available for independent, peer-reviewed study by geologists or linguists. The few photographs that exist are grainy and inconclusive, and the supposed translated text has never been published in a scholarly journal for analysis. The unusual skeletons central to the alien claim have never been examined by physical anthropologists. From a scientific standpoint, there is simply no evidence to evaluate, which leads mainstream archaeology to dismiss the Dropa stones entirely as a modern fabrication, an elaborate hoax born in the mid-20th century. This dismissal, however, does not end the conversation, it simply shifts its focus. The enduring fascination with the Dropa story is not about archaeology, but about mythology in the making. It exemplifies how a compelling narrative, once released into the world, can become its own kind of cultural artifact, resistant to facts. The tale emerged and spread during a post-war era ripe with fascination for flying saucers and ancient astronauts, a time when books like Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods were reshaping popular ideas about the past. The Dropa story provided a tantalizing physical proof for those ideas, a set of stone records that seemed to confirm our deepest speculative longings. Its power lies in its elements. The remote location feels like a place where secrets could be kept. The strange skeletons bypass human history entirely, and the indecipherable script promises a revelation just beyond our grasp. It is a myth engineered for the modern age, blending the authority of archaeology with the wonder of science fiction. The stones, whether they ever physically existed or not, ask us a poignant question about our relationship with the unknown. Why are we sometimes more captivated by a beautiful, unverifiable story than by the complex, often gradual truths uncovered by meticulous science? The Dropa legend thrives in the fertile gap between what we know and what we wish could be true. It serves as a mirror, reflecting a timeless human desire to find evidence that we are not alone, and that our ancient past is far more wondrous than our textbooks dare to suggest. In this way, the mystery of the Dropa Stones is ultimately a mystery about ourselves and the stories we choose to keep alive long after the evidence has turned to dust. The final resting place of a man who reshaped the map of the known world has itself been lost to history. Alexander III of Macedon, a leader whose very name became a legend, passed away in Babylon in the year 323 before the Common Era. His body, according to ancient accounts, was placed in a magnificent gold sarcophagus filled with honey, a precious preservative, and began a long, contested journey. It was destined for his homeland, but the procession was intercepted by one of his former generals, Ptolemy, who diverted the funeral carriage to Egypt, first to the ancient capital of Memphis, and later to the city Alexander himself had founded, Alexandria. There, it is said, a grand tomb was built, a place of pilgrimage for Roman emperors like Julius Caesar and Augustus, who came to pay their respects and even to adjust the conqueror's golden diadem. For centuries, the location was an accepted fact of the ancient world, a fixed point in the geography of power, and then, like so much of that world, it simply faded from view. The great library of Alexandria burned, the city was reshaped by earthquakes, conquests, and the slow rise of the sea, and the precise location of the soma, or body, of Alexander was swallowed by time. The disappearance of such a pivotal landmark is a profound historical rupture. It represents the fragility of even the most monumental legacies, a reminder that stone and gold are no match for the relentless tide of centuries. The search for the tomb is not merely an archaeological treasure hunt. It is a quest to physically reconnect with the fulcrum of an era, to stand in the presence of the man whose short life irrevocably linked the cultures of Greece, Egypt, and Persia, spreading Hellenistic influence across 3 continents. This search has been relentless, spanning from medieval Arab historians to modern teams armed with ground-penetrating radar. Excavations have probed beneath the streets of modern Alexandria for any sign of a monumental structure, while theories have placed the tomb in the catacombs of the ancient Serapeum Temple, or even suggest it lies submerged in the city's eastern harbor. Every so often, a discovery sends a ripple of excitement through the scholarly world, like the unearthing of a large alabaster tomb in the city's ancient royal quarter, but none have yielded the definitive, inscribed proof that would end the mystery. The enduring absence forces us to confront a different kind of truth. Alexander's physical legacy may be lost, but his cultural and political legacy is everywhere, embedded in the art, architecture, and dynasties that followed him. The search for his tomb, therefore, becomes a metaphor for historical understanding itself, a process of piecing together fragments, following faint trails in ancient texts, and listening to the silent testimony of the earth. It is a detective story that underscores how a single individual story can inspire endless curiosity, driving us to look for the man behind the myth, hoping that somewhere beneath the bustling modern city, a chamber still holds the quiet answer to where the great king finally came to rest. A single object can hold an entire civilization's silence. In the ruins of the Minoan palace of Phaistos on the island of Crete, archaeologists unearthed a clay disc that seems to contain a complete, self-contained language no one can read. The Phaistos Disc, roughly the size of a small dinner plate, is not inscribed with a pen or stylus. Its surface is covered with 241 individual symbols, each one stamped into the soft clay with a separate seal before the disc was fired, making it one of the earliest known examples of movable type printing in the world. The symbols themselves are a captivating gallery of the familiar and the cryptic, human heads with elaborate hairstyles, birds, fish, flowers, shields, and tools, all arranged in a tight, clockwise spiral that coils inward from the disc's edge. This is not a random scattering. The symbols are grouped into what appear to be 45 distinct words, separated by short vertical lines. The structure is undeniable, it looks and feels like a deliberate, organized message. Yet from the moment it was discovered in 1908, it has stood utterly alone, a linguistic island with no bridge to any known shore. The core of the mystery is its profound isolation. The script on the disc is unique, appearing nowhere else in the vast archaeological record of Minoan Crete, not on palace walls, not on clay tablets, not on any other artifact. It is a hapax legomenon on a monumental scale, a one-of-a-kind document with no key, no parallel texts, and no obvious cultural context. This singularity makes every attempt at decipherment an exercise in educated guesswork. Is it a form of writing, encoding a specific narrative, a prayer, or a legal decree? Could it be a sophisticated game board, its symbols representing moves or challenges in a ritual contest? Perhaps it is a ceremonial object, a symbolic calendar for tracking agricultural cycles or religious festivals, where each pictogram marks a specific event or offering. Without a second example to compare it to, or a bilingual inscription to act as a Rosetta Stone, scholars cannot even confirm the most basic fact, which direction the spiral should be read, from the center out or from the rim inward. The very technique of its creation adds another layer of intrigue. The use of individual stamps suggests the symbols were part of a standardized set, implying the script was developed for repeated use, not just for this one disc. So where are all the other documents? Were they made on perishable materials like parchment or leather that have long since crumbled? Or was this disc itself a unique commission, a royal edict or a dedicatory object meant to be singular from the start? The frustration it inspires is as precise as its stamped circles. Over a century of effort by professional linguists and amateur sleuths alike has produced dozens of proposed translations, linking it to ancient Greek, Hittite, even a form of early Slavic. Some see it as a hymn to a mother goddess, others as a list of geographic locations or a record of a military campaign. But without corroborating evidence, none of these readings can move from compelling theory to accepted fact. The disc, therefore, is more than an undeciphered text. It is a profound lesson in the fragility of knowledge. It represents a complete system of communication, a snapshot of a thought process, frozen in clay for 3,500 years. It is a message sent with perfect clarity by its maker, yet received by us as nothing but a beautiful, impenetrable pattern. It asks us to consider how much of a culture's inner world, its stories, its jokes, its daily records, can vanish without a trace, leaving behind only the ghost of a code stamped in clay, a silent witness to all that has been lost in the unrecorded spaces between the stones. A legion does not simply vanish from the rolls of the most meticulous military machine the ancient world had ever known. Yet, sometime after the year 120 of the Common Era, the Legio Nona Hispana, the renowned 9th Spanish Legion, ceases to appear in the stone-carved records of the Roman Empire. Its last certain posting was in the damp, mist-shrouded fortress of Eboracum, modern-day York, at the northern edge of Roman Britain. Then the historical trail goes cold, leaving behind a silence that has echoed for nearly 2,000 years. The disappearance of over 5,000 highly trained soldiers, along with their support staff and families, is not just a missing persons case, it is a gap in the imperial ledger that begs for an explanation. Where did they go, and what does their absence tell us about the limits of Rome's power at the very fringe of its world? Theories about their fate form a spectrum from the brutally straightforward to the complexly administrative. The most enduring and dramatic story, popularized in literature and film, is that the 9th marched north from York to quell an uprising among the fierce Pictish tribes of what is now Scotland, and was utterly annihilated in a remote, misty glen. This narrative paints a powerful picture of the empire's reach exceeding its grasp, of a disciplined force swallowed by the wild landscape, and an enemy who left no Roman historian to tell the tale. It transforms the Legion into a symbol of the mysterious, unconquered North, a warning etched not in stone but in the absence of 5,000 men. While compelling, modern archaeology has yet to uncover a battlefield site with the concentrated debris of such a catastrophic loss, the broken swords, scattered armor, and coins that would mark the Legion's final stand. A second, less romantic but equally plausible theory suggests the Legion was not destroyed but relocated. The Roman military was a fluid instrument, and entire legions were sometimes transferred across the empire to meet new threats. Some fragmentary evidence points to units of the 9th possibly being present in the Netherlands or even on the eastern frontier in the province of Judea during later conflicts. Could the Legion have been broken up, its cohorts sent as reinforcements to various hotspots, its identity gradually dissolving into other units until its famous number was retired? This administrative dissolution would be a quiet, bureaucratic end, far from the heroic last stand, but it fits the pattern of how the empire managed its vast military resources over time. A third possibility involves a more direct but still obscure disaster. The Legion could have been disbanded in disgrace following a significant military failure that the imperial record chose not to memorialize. Or it might have been ravaged not by Pictish swords, but by disease, a plague sweeping through the crowded barracks of a northern fort and decimating its ranks so thoroughly that the unit could not be reconstituted. Such a mundane tragedy, a battle lost not to an enemy but to illness, would explain the lack of a glorious narrative in the history books. The enduring power of this mystery lies in what it represents. The lost 9th Legion has become a blank canvas upon which we project our ideas about the Roman Empire's relationship with its frontiers. Its story speaks to the fragility of historical knowledge, reminding us that even for a civilization that documented so much, vast stretches of experience, especially at the messy edges of empire, have slipped into the fog. The silence surrounding the Legion's fate is a testament to the opaque nature of ancient military record-keeping, where the disappearance of a single unit, however large, might not merit a detailed explanation if it served no political purpose for those writing the histories. Ultimately, the quest for the 9th is a search for a definitive ending that history may never provide. It asks us to sit with uncertainty, to recognize that some stories from the ancient world are defined not by their climax, but by their sudden, unresolved cessation. The Legion's empty space on the roster is a ghost in the machine of history, a reminder that on the misty borders of the known world, even the mightiest empire could lose track of its own. Gold could not keep the cold from claiming a city. Far beyond the Arctic Circle, where winter darkness reigns for months, a legend persisted among Siberian fur trappers and traders of a lost city of unimaginable wealth, a place called Mangaisia. Founded in the early 1600s, this was no minor outpost, but a bustling metropolis of the north, a crucial hub where Russian merchants traded European cloth, metalware, and beads for the most precious commodity of the frozen wilderness, sable fur. For decades it thrived, its streets lined with log houses, its warehouses overflowing with pelts so luxurious they were called soft gold. Then, within a single lifetime, it was emptied, abandoned, and its precise location swallowed by the tundra and the drifting snow. It transformed from a thriving center of commerce into a ghost story, a whispered Arctic El Dorado that many believed was pure myth. The mystery of Mangaisia was twofold: first, to find if it ever truly existed, and second, to understand how such a prosperous node in a global trade network could simply blink out of existence. The rediscovery in the 1960s and 70s by Soviet archaeologists was a moment of profound historical resurrection. Using old maps and local accounts, they located the site on the frozen banks of the Taz River. The permafrost had acted as a perfect deep freeze, preserving not just the foundations of log buildings, but an astonishing array of everyday life: leather boots, wooden utensils, intricate jewelry, and of course, the bones of the sable that fueled it all. They found the remains of a fortress, a guest yard for merchants, and even a necropolis, painting a vivid picture of a vibrant, cosmopolitan community at the very edge of the known world. With the city found, the mystery elegantly shifted from where to why. Why was a city this successful, this vital, deliberately abandoned? The answer lies in a collision of economics, geography, and imperial decree. Mangasia's wealth came from its position on the Mangasian Sea Route, an audacious Arctic passage where merchants sailed treacherous northern waters to bypass the long, taxed overland routes. This made fur cheaper and more plentiful, but it also meant wealth flowed outside of the Tsar's tight control. In 1619, seeking to monopolize the lucrative trade and curb the independence of these frontier merchants, the Russian government issued a devastating ban, forbidding any use of the sea route to Mangasia on pain of death. The city's economic lifeline was severed at a stroke. Cut off from the efficient supply line that gave it life, the settlement became impossibly expensive and difficult to sustain. The harsh Arctic environment, once a challenge overcome by great profit, became an insurmountable barrier. One by one, the merchants left, the trappers moved on, and the wooden city fell silent. Within a few decades, it was empty, a skeleton of logs slowly sinking into the permafrost. The story of Mangasia is a powerful lesson in the fragility of human enterprise. It shows how a community can flourish in the most hostile environment when the economic conditions are right, and how swiftly it can vanish when those conditions change by political fiat. It is not a tale of invasion or natural disaster, but of a paper decree issued in a distant capital that echoed across the tundra, turning a city of gold into a city of ghosts. Its legacy, preserved in ice, reminds us that history is often written not just by kings and conquerors, but by trade winds, by the value of a single pelt, and by the silent, patient cold that waits to reclaim all that we build. The verdant fields of medieval Suffolk held a harvest of a different kind. In the 12th century, according to chroniclers Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh, villagers near the town of Woolpit made an astonishing discovery. While reaping their crops, they found two small children, a boy and a girl, huddled at the edge of a wolf pit used for trapping. Their appearance was as startling as their sudden presence. Their skin was tinged a deep, unnatural green, and they wore clothing of a strange, unfamiliar material. They spoke no English, only a language no one could recognize, and they refused all food offered to them except for raw beans plucked straight from the stalk. The villagers took them in, and slowly a transformation began. As the children adapted to their new diet and surroundings, the green hue faded from their skin. They learned to speak English, and when they could finally communicate, they told a story that deepened the mystery. They claimed to come from a twilight land, a place they called St. Martin's Land, where the sun never shone brightly and all the people were green like them. They remembered following their father's cattle into a cave, hearing a loud sound like bells, and then emerging into the blinding brightness of the Suffolk field. The boy, sadly, grew weak and passed away not long after, but the girl, named Agnes, thrived, eventually losing all traces of her green color, marrying a local man, and living out her life in the area. This peculiar account, the tale of the green children of Woolpit, sits at a fascinating crossroads. It is recorded in generally reliable historical chronicles, yet it reads like a fragment of pure folklore. So what truly happened in that field 800 years ago? The theories that seek to explain the children are as layered as the story itself. One of the most grounded explanations points to a medical condition. Chlorosis, a form of anemia often caused by severe malnutrition, can give the skin a pale, greenish pallor. If the children were suffering from extreme hunger and perhaps a genetic iron deficiency, their unusual coloration could have been a symptom of their hardship, fading as their diet improved with the villagers' care. Their initial refusal to eat anything but beans could support this, as they may have been too weak or ill to digest anything else. Another compelling theory places the story in a specific historical context. During the 12th century, King Henry II invited Flemish weavers to settle in England, but later conflicts led to persecution, forcing some to flee into the countryside. The children could have been lost Flemish orphans, their strange clothing simply foreign garb, their unknown language a dialect of Flemish. Disoriented, malnourished, and hiding in the forests, they might have emerged with a sickly complexion that was interpreted as green. Their description of a twilight land could be a child's confused memory of their foggy, forested homeland, and the loud sound like bells could have been the nearby bells of the Abbey of Bury St. Edmunds. Yet the story resists being pinned down entirely to history or medicine. Its elements feel mythic: the otherworldly color, the subterranean journey, the lost land of perpetual twilight. It echoes older Celtic tales of fairy folk emerging from hollow hills, suggesting the chroniclers may have been recording a local folktale that had already woven itself around a kernel of real events, perhaps the discovery of two lost, sickly orphans. The enduring power of the Green Children lies in this very ambiguity. It is a story that feels too specific to be pure invention, yet too strange to be straightforward history. It invites us to consider how people in the Middle Ages made sense of the truly unfamiliar, how they used the frameworks of wonder, faith, and folklore to explain encounters that lay outside their understanding. The tale transforms a possible act of village compassion into a lasting legend, reminding us that sometimes the most enduring mysteries are not about grand civilizations or lost treasures, but about two small, frightened figures at the edge of a field, whose true story became a quiet, green whisper in the long memory of the English countryside. Gold has a way of writing its own legends in the blood and rock of a frontier. In the harsh, beautiful expanse of Arizona's Superstition Mountains, the most enduring story is not carved in ancient stone, but whispered on the dry wind. It is the tale of the lost Dutchman's gold mine, a secret so valuable it has remained hidden for over a century, despite the desperate efforts of countless souls to find it. The story begins not with a Dutchman, but with a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, who, in the late 1800s, was said to have possessed astonishingly rich gold ore and spoke in riddles of a mine in the Superstitions. After his passing in 1891, the legend truly took flight, weaving together earlier tales of Spanish conquest, Apache guardianship, and sudden, violent ends for those who knew the location. Walt's cryptic deathbed clues, pointing to a landmark like the Weaver's Needle Rock Formation and a shadow that fell across the entrance at a certain hour, became a treasure map written in rumor. The mystery here is not archaeological in the traditional sense, for no verified mine from this period has ever been documented in the area. Instead, it is a fascinating study in how a potent myth is born and why it refuses to die. The ingredients are classic: a remote and treacherous landscape that guards its secrets, a lone prospector with a tantalizing secret, and the ultimate prize of unimaginable wealth just waiting to be reclaimed. This combination has proven irresistible, drawing generations of treasure hunters into the canyons, each armed with maps, metal detectors, and a fervent hope. The human cost has been tragically real. The Superstition Mountains are a legitimate wilderness with extreme heat, sudden storms, and difficult terrain. Over the decades, numerous individuals have lost their lives in the search, some to exposure or accident, others under more mysterious circumstances, adding layers of ominous lore about a curse protecting the gold. These very real hardships become woven back into the legend, reinforcing the idea that the treasure must be extraordinary to be so fiercely defended, if not by supernatural forces, then by the landscape itself. Yet, despite the deaths and the decades of searching, no mine matching the legendary description has been verified by geologists or historians. This absence is the engine of the mystery. It allows the story to continually renew itself. Every failed expedition can be explained away, the clues were misinterpreted, the map was a fake, or the seeker was not worthy. The mine remains eternally just around the next bend, in the next canyon, waiting for the right person with the right key. This transforms the Lost Dutchman from a historical puzzle into a psychological and cultural phenomenon. It functions as a modern-day Grail quest, a tangible focus for our timeless dreams of sudden fortune and discovery. The mine is less a physical location and more a mirror reflecting our own desires, stubbornness, and capacity for hope. It has spawned books, documentaries, and a thriving local folklore in Arizona, becoming an integral part of the region's identity. The story endures because it answers a deep need for a mystery that is still solvable, a treasure that is still out there, a last great adventure waiting in the American West. It asks us why we are so compelled to believe in a secret that has eluded proof for so long, and what that enduring belief tells us about the stories we need to tell ourselves about luck, perseverance, and the landscapes that keep their promises only in whispers. A glowing feather fallen from the sky is a promise of wonder and peril. Woven through the rich tapestry of medieval Russian folklore is the radiant figure of the firebird, a creature of such dazzling beauty that a single feather from its plumage could light up an entire room. Capturing it was the ultimate quest for heroes and tsars, a test of cunning and purity, for the bird was both a blessing and a curse, its allure often leading the greedy to ruin. These are the stories we know as enchanting fairy tales, but nestled within their magical logic is a fascinating possibility. Could they be distant, distorted memories of real celestial events witnessed by ancient peoples and transformed by generations of storytelling? This 49th mystery asks us to look at mythology not as mere invention, but as a form of ancient testimony, a way cultures processed and preserved encounters with the inexplicable. The theory suggests that the core imagery of the firebird, its sudden, brilliant appearance and its connection to light in the darkness, might have roots in two powerful natural phenomena. The first is the aurora borealis, the northern lights. For people living in the vast Siberian expanses, the night sky could suddenly come alive with shimmering curtains of green, red, and violet light, dancing silently overhead in a display that feels both majestic and supernatural. A person witnessing this for the first time, with no concept of solar winds and magnetospheres, might very well describe it as a giant, radiant bird spreading its incandescent wings across the heavens. The erratic, fleeting movement of the aurora mirrors the firebird's elusive nature in the tales, here one moment and gone the next, impossible to pin down. The second, more dramatic candidate is the meteorite impact, a brilliant fireball streaking across the night sky, fragmenting into a shower of glowing pieces that fall to earth, could easily be narrated as a celestial bird shedding its luminous feathers. Even more compelling, when a meteorite made of iron-nickel alloy strikes the ground, the intense heat can fuse the surrounding sand into strange, glassy formations. To a medieval peasant or hunter stumbling upon such a sight, finding jagged, glowing pieces of fused glass and unusual metal stones near a scorched crater, the conclusion might be obvious. This must be where the fiery bird landed, where it built its nest, and where it left behind fragments of its otherworldly body. This process of myth-making is not about ignorance but about interpretation. It represents the human mind doing what it does best, taking raw, awe-inspiring data from the environment and weaving it into a narrative framework that makes sense within their existing worldview. A terrifying, unexplained light in the sky becomes a magical creature with agency and rules. A strange, scorched patch of earth with unearthly stones becomes a tangible clue to that creature's passing, a physical anchor for the story. The tale then grows and changes, passed down by generations. The fear and wonder of the original witness gets smoothed into the rhythms of a folk story, complete with heroes, trials, and moral lessons about desire and humility. The mysterious nest of light becomes a symbolic goal, a treasure that can only be attained by the worthy. This transformation from event to legend is how a culture metabolizes the extraordinary, turning a singular, shocking observation into a shared cultural touchstone that educates, entertains, and explains the capricious nature of the world. The enduring mystery of the firebird's nest, then, is not about finding a literal pile of glowing feathers in a Siberian forest. It is about listening to the old stories with a different ear, hearing in their magical descriptions the possible echoes of real gasps of wonder pointed at the night sky. It reminds us that our ancestors were not just storytellers, they were the first scientists and historians, attempting to catalogue the wonders of their world with the most powerful tools they had, narrative and symbol. Their myths are a bridge connecting us to the moment a human being looked up at a shimmering aurora or a falling star and felt compelled to tell a tale so beautiful, so resonant, that we are still enchanted by it centuries later, forever searching for the truth glimmering within the glow of the fantasy. Fire is a promise that can be kept for millennia. On the wind-swept Absheron Peninsula of Azerbaijan, the earth itself exhales a wonder, natural gas seeping from fissures in the stone and igniting into pillars of flame that have danced without ceasing for as long as human memory reaches. The most famous of these, the eternal flame of Yana Dag, or Burning Mountain, licks at a 10-meter-long wall of sandstone, a spectacle of raw, untamed power that has never gone out, even in rain or snow. The geological explanation is straightforward. A subsurface reservoir of natural gas finds a vent to the surface and, once ignited by lightning or a human spark, burns as long as the fuel supply lasts. Yet, to label this a solved mystery is to miss the deeper, more resonant question it poses. For ancient peoples who witnessed this defiance of nature's cycles, this was not a chemical process, it was a divine signature. The true enigma lies not in how the fire burns, but in why the human spirit, confronted with such a phenomenon, instinctively saw a gateway to the sacred. This site, and others like it, became the heart of a profound religious tradition. For the Zoroastrians, whose faith is one of humanity's oldest, fire was not merely a symbol of the divine, it was a pure manifestation of it, a visible form of the supreme god Ahura Mazda's wisdom and the cosmic struggle between light and darkness. A flame that required no wood, that fed directly from the breath of the earth, was the ultimate sacred fire, an Hga or fire temple. Pilgrims would travel vast distances to stand before these eternal flames, to meditate on their purity, and to perform rituals that connected the earthly realm with the celestial. The fire was a living teacher, demonstrating constancy in a changing world, cleansing power, and the luminous presence of order amidst chaos. To stand before Yana Dag today is to witness the same mesmerizing dance that captivated philosophers, traders, and warriors along the Silk Road for centuries. It asks us to consider how different cultures map meaning onto the world. Where we see a hydrocarbon seep, they saw a direct line to the divine, a proof that the spiritual world was not abstract but physically present, blazing from the rock for all to see. This final mystery brings our journey through the 50 enigmas to a poignant close, not with a question of lost technology or a vanished city, but with a contemplation of the human mind itself. It reminds us that the greatest puzzles of the ancient world are often dual in nature. There is the objective mechanism, the how, which science patiently unravels, whether it is the chemistry of rust resistance or the physics of moving stones. And then there is the subjective meaning, the why, which is written in the language of myth, faith, and art. this second layer is not diminished by understanding the first, it is enriched by it. Knowing the gas vent explains the flame, but it does not explain the awe, the pilgrimage, or the centuries of reverence that transformed a geological oddity into a cornerstone of a world religion. The eternal fire of Baku, then, is a perfect emblem for this entire exploration. It shows that our quest to understand the past is never just about filling in blanks on a timeline or identifying builders. It is about recovering the depth of human experience, the capacity for wonder that led our ancestors to build monuments to the stars, to carve messages they hoped would last forever, and to see in a flickering, unquenchable flame the very light of creation. These 50 mysteries, from the pyramids to the perpetual fire, are not merely problems to be solved. They are invitations to a continuous conversation, a reminder that history is not a closed book but an open landscape, still whispering with the voices of those who came before, asking us to look, to wonder, and to find our own meaning in the enduring puzzles they left behind. These 50 scattered puzzles begin to form a map when viewed from a distance. They are not random curiosities, but tend to cluster around profound, recurring themes in the human story. A striking number point to what we might call lost technologies, not necessarily futuristic gadgets, but peaks of practical knowledge that seem to vanish from the record. The precise joinery of Sacsayhuamon, the rust-resistant chemistry of the Delhi pillar, and the geared astronomy of the Antikythera Mechanism all represent sophisticated understandings of materials and mathematics that were not broadly replicated for centuries. They suggest that innovation in the ancient world was not a steady, upward climb, but a landscape of isolated peaks where a community's specialized skill could reach an extraordinary height, only to be forgotten when that community dispersed or fell. Another powerful pattern connects the earth to the sky, from the solstice alignment of Stonehenge to the possible lunar observatory of Carnac, and from the celestial pointers of the pyramids to the star charts implied by the Nazca Lines. Our ancestors repeatedly embedded cosmic cycles into their most enduring creations. This was not mere stargazing, it was a fundamental way of anchoring human life to a perceived cosmic order, turning temples into calendars and landscapes into sacred diagrams. A third, more somber thread involves sudden silence, the catastrophic disappearance, the collapse of the Sea People's targets, the sinking of Helike, the emptying of Roanoke and Mangasia. Each speaks to the fragile equilibrium between civilization and its environment, whether that environment is a trade route, a tectonic plate, or a political decree. These are stories where the music stops abruptly, leaving behind an artifact mid-use, a meal uneaten, a city frozen in time. What these patterns collectively reveal is a crucial insight. Our standard historical timelines are vast oversimplifications. They present a neat progression of epochs, one leading neatly to the next, but the mysteries show us a past that is far more textured, more experimental, and more interconnected. They hint at early, long-distance exchanges of ideas that predate the formal Silk Roads, at independent discoveries of similar principles across the globe, and at cultural expressions so unique they stand as lonely monuments, like the moai of Rapa Nui or the spheres of Costa Rica, with no clear lineage or descendant. These enigmas exist precisely in the gaps, in the space between a single piece of archaeological evidence and a full historical narrative, or at the very edge of a written record where history bleeds into legend. They are the outliers that challenge the mainstream story, the fragments that do not quite fit the established puzzle. And it is in these fragments that we find the most compelling invitations, for they suggest that human history is not a single, unified tale, but a tapestry of countless threads, many of which were cut short, woven over, or faded before the pattern was complete. To study them is to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge, and to embrace the exhilarating possibility that the past holds far more diversity, ingenuity, and mystery than our textbooks could ever contain. That final, flickering flame in Azerbaijan is a perfect metaphor for the journey we have just taken. These 50 unsolved mysteries are not merely empty spaces on a timeline. They are active, living questions that continue to burn in the human imagination. Each one, from the staggering ambition of the pyramids to the quiet disappearance of a colony, serves as a powerful reminder that history is not a settled record in a dusty book. It is a vibrant, ongoing dialogue between what we know and what we suspect, a conversation that is constantly being rewritten with every new technological advance, every satellite scan of a desert, and every fragment of pottery carefully pieced together. They challenge our most comfortable assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, forcing us to expand our understanding of human ingenuity, resilience, and spirituality. They do not simply ask how something was built or where a people went, they ask why. Why did a culture invest generations in moving stones they could never see from the ground? Why would a society choose to encode its deepest knowledge in a code that seems designed to be forgotten? These questions push past the mechanics of the past and into the realm of meaning, inviting us to wonder not just about facts, but about the inner lives of those who came before us. This relentless curiosity is the true engine of discovery. It is what drives an archaeologist to sift through another layer of soil, a linguist to stare at a strange script for the 1000th time, and a historian to re-examine a centuries-old document with fresh eyes. The enduring power of these enigmas proves that the past is not a closed chapter. It is a frontier still holding profound secrets that wait patiently for the right key, the right question, or the right moment to reveal themselves. They remind us that some of the greatest stories are not the ones that have been told, but the ones that are still being uncovered, piece by tantalizing piece. So let these mysteries be a spark for your own imagination. Which of these forgotten stories resonated with you the most? Was it the haunting silence of the Roanoke colonists, the celestial ambition of the pyramid builders, or the lonely, perfect script of the Voynich Manuscript? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear which puzzle captures your curiosity. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's hidden corners, be sure to subscribe for more journeys to the edges of our understanding. Keep questioning, keep wondering, and never stop looking for the next great mystery waiting just beneath the surface.